Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku becomes Starfleet Captain Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, TheGingerTrekkie from AO3. So let's start the video. My name is Izuki Midoriya, and this is the story of how I defied all odds to become the symbol of peace for the Federation, the galaxy's greatest hero. I'm sure you're wondering why I've called you here. Vice Admiral Aizawa grumbled as he tilted his head back to deliver medicated drops to each of his bloodshot eyes. The Vice Admiral was melted into a large, dark blue LTHR chair. His jet black hair, which usually drooped over his face, was pulled back into a bun. It showed an uncharacteristic level of intent, but was a mess nonetheless. His red command uniform was heavily wrinkled and clearly too large for his wiry frame. Any other Starfleet officer would be reprimanded for such extreme dress code violations, but someone with his service record was given a certain level of leniency. His desk was littered with precariously stacked pads letting out muffled notification chirps, and empty, coffee-stained mugs with a stale aroma that permeated the office. A small couch was wedged into a corner of the small room with a puffy, yellow sleeping bag draped over it. It wasn't uncommon for Aizawa to spend his nights in the office. Lieutenant Commander Izuku Midoriya sat in a smaller chair across from Aizawa, nervously drumming his scarred fingers on the side of the chair in anticipation. In contrast to the Vice Admiral, Midoriya's gold-tinted operations uniform was crisp and spotless. His dark green hair, while unruly in his academy days, was in a meticulously styled undercut. Sweat was building under his collar and he shifted uncomfortably. No one expected his career to make it this far. During his first year at Starfleet, Midoriya scored the lowest in almost every examination, held an embarrassing fear of heights, and had no previous familial background within the fleet. Everyone, including Vice Admiral Aizawa, dismissed him early on and expected him to drop out by his second year. Through the entire ordeal, only one person stood in his corner, Admiral Toshinori Yagi. The Admiral, who gained fame under the alias All Might during his early service, seemed to be on Midoriya's side from the beginning. In fact, he convinced him to apply to Starfleet in the first place. Despite the initial fumbles, Midoriya managed to prove everyone wrong. He displayed power and determination that rivaled All Might himself and ultimately graduated third in his class. Sitting next to the Midoriya was Commander Katsuki Bakugo with arms crossed over a red command uniform. His ruby eyes darted back and forth between the Vice Admiral and Midoriya, giving them a death glare. He shared class as Midoriya before and during the academy. The two had even been childhood friends, but their relationship has soured over the years and showed no signs of improving. Bakugo had made a point to beat Midoriya in every challenge the academy threw at them, graduating second in their class with near-perfect test scores. He excelled from the start and shot up the ranks after becoming a commissioned officer. With an extreme list of accomplishments under his belt, everyone assumed Bakugo would be the youngest person in Starfleet to gain command of a starship, but fate had other plans. The Vice Admiral stood to address the pair. "I'm sure you've both heard about the Starship Yuuei, a brand new vessel that Starfleet plans to send out on an exploratory mission within the next year." Bakugo nodded and Midoriya held his breath. "Considering your exceptional academy performance and the accomplishments you have made as officers, your names came up often while forming command assignments." Bakugo leaned back with a victorious grin as Midoriya clenched his fists in suspense. "I've brought you here to announce that, after much consideration, we decided that Lieutenant Commander Midoriya will be promoted to the rank of captain and will be put in command of the Starship Yuuei." "What?" Bakugo leapt up and slammed his hands on the Vice Admiral's desk with an explosive bang that caused Midoriya to yelp. The stacks of pads collapsed, littering the floor in all directions. Rage burned in his eyes as he stared daggers at the Vice Admiral, who remained relaxed in his chair, unfazed by the outburst. "You've got to be kidding me," the commander hissed as smaller sizzling pops erupted from his palms and singed the desk. "You can't promote Deku over me. I have more experience in the field. I have a higher rank." "Had a higher rank," the Vice Admiral retorted. "You can't do this." Midoriya cowered in his seat, both hands gripping the edges until his knuckles turned white. Although he had grown up with him, Bakugo's frequent outbursts still shook him to his core. The two had been separated for the last several years. Bakugo had been stationed on a starship engaging in war exercises along the Romulan neutral zone while Midoriya served close to home at Saturn Station. The trembling man, feeling more like a boy, eyed the commander nervously. His stomach twisted into a knot as he watched his childhood source of so much intimidation and inspiration yell into the Vice Admiral's face like a tantruming child. All Might had clued Midoriya in on the new starship a week earlier and encouraged him to apply for a command position. He decided to follow through with the application on a whim, but never in a million years would have expected such an impressive promotion, especially not over Bakugo. I wasn't 100% behind this decision either. I don't think the lieutenant commander is ready to take this position, the vice admiral admitted. The words hit Midoriya like a ton of bricks. I don't think he is ready to make tough decisions, but Midoriya has friends in high places. My hands are tied. Midoriya sunk into his chair. Somehow, those words hit even harder. Commander Bakugo, you are being promoted to second in command. Although I think you have what it takes to truly shine, you have been deemed too reckless for a command at this time, and I agree with that assessment. This will be a good learning experience for both of you. You will both be debriefed on your mission next week. You are dismissed. Midoriya leapt up and nearly ran out of the room, all too aware of Bakugo's vengeful stare burning into his back. As he entered the hall, he heard Bakugo erupt again behind the closed office door, causing passers-by to stop and stare, pondering what they must have missed out on. Midoriya pressed his back against the wall outside of the office, hearing the one-sided tirade of Bakugo's bruised ego piercing through. This was supposed to be his moment. He, at 23, was the youngest person in Starfleet to be given a ship. He felt sick and deflated. An explosion shook the wall and Midoriya leaned his head back with a thud, closing his eyes and groaning to himself. Bakugo was not taking the news well. He didn't want this promotion. He didn't want to be on a ship with Bakugo. Why, oh why had he listened to All Might? The room went quiet and Midoriya picked himself up with a sigh, making his way sullenly down the hallway, then out of the lobby doors into the cold San Francisco air. The chilly winter breeze sent shivers down his spine as he sulked around the courtyard. His body had grown accustomed to the regulated temperature on Saturn Station. Midoriya folded his arms and retreated into himself, looking up at the gray sky and muttering to himself in an attempt to brainstorm a way out of this unwinnable situation. I won't know how shitty the situation is until the mission brief, he grumbled, shivering as another gust of wind stung the tips of his ears. All Might didn't give me many details about the ship, or our objective. A pair of small, delicate hands reached around and covered Midoriya's eyes, snapping him out of his thoughts as he flinched in surprise. There was a chin resting on his shoulder and a cheek pressed against his own. Guess who? A familiar friendly voice whispered into Midoriya's ear, causing his cheeks to flush a deep red. Uraraka. Midoriya squealed. Ochako. Uraraka corrected, as she walked around to face Midoriya. We've known each other for years. It's time you let us be on a first-name basis. Midoriya chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck as they turned and began to stroll down the courtyard. They made small talk about their activities after graduation. Uraraka had grown her hair out over the past few years, and it was pulled up into two buns on either side of her head. Midoriya thought her blue science uniform complemented her auburn eyes, and her, well, everything else. It wasn't an appropriate time to think about that, it was just nice to see her again. She went in depth about the research she had been conducting. Her gravity manipulation abilities came in handy in her day-to-day work. He was glad to have someone there to distract him from his miserable day, but his relief quickly dissipated as the conversation turned to him. So, what are you doing back on Earth? Uraraka asked, nudging Midoriya with her elbow. I got a promotion, to captain. He broke eye contact and started at the ground. Her eyes lit up at the news and a loud, excited squeal left her lips as she jumped in joy. That's insane. she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Midoriya's shoulders and squeezing him tightly. That's so exciting. Aren't you excited? We have to go get drinks to celebrate. Is it on the Yuuei? I bet it's on the Yuuei. I'm being transferred to the Yuuei. You're transferring to the Yuuei? Midoriya cried, ignoring her other questions as tears of relief collected at the corners of his eyes. Oh, thank God. Uraraka pulled back from the tight embrace, holding Midoriya at arm's length. She stared deeply into his eyes with a look of concern plastered on her face. Before she was able to question him further, a loud explosion echoed through the courtyard. Bakugo slammed the door behind him and charged through, his clenched fist still smoking. Even at a distance, Midoriya could see that Bakugo's jaw was clenched down tightly enough to crack a molar. He wondered how long it would take his new second-in-command to come around, or if he would come around at all. Uraraka's eyes followed Bakugo until he turned the corner and was out of sight. There was an expression on her face that Midoriya couldn't quite place. Not annoyed or judgmental, just sad. Let's go get drinks, she uttered. Her eyes were still fixed on the last spot she saw Bakugo. I'm paying. Katsuki exploded at the Vice Admiral. Uraraka blurted out with a heavy slur, waving wildly at a passing waitress and pointing at her empty shot glass. That idiot. No wonder they promoted you over him. She burst out in flamboyant laughter, slamming the table and causing a clash of shot glasses. Midoriya smiled uncomfortably, doing his best to try to counteract her ruckus and keep his full glass from tipping over and spilling onto their table. When Uraraka invited him out for drinks, Midoriya had imagined a night of nostalgia with an NTMT part of his past in a cozy restaurant, not this. It must have been a sight. He spent the night being dragged through the town, from bar to bar by an adorable, round-faced science officer, eventually ending in some of the raunchiest strip clubs in San Francisco. Midoriya had never been in such a scandalous place in his entire life. Women in all shapes, sizes, and species danced on floating platforms near the ceiling, their bioluminescent features, both natural and artificial, and glowed under the black lights. The waitresses were all covered from head to toe in colorful paint and carrying large trays filled with delicately balanced shot glasses. If the young captain had realized this is where Uraraka wanted to go, he wouldn't have been sporting a Starfleet uniform which was attracting unwanted attention. Bodies were constantly brushing up against Midoriya in the packed room. Some were touching him on purpose, grabbing his triceps and whispering inappropriate things in his ear as they passed. He focused his attention squarely on his drink, keeping his head down and blocking out the noise. Uraraka, on the other hand, seemed to be having a great time, taking shot after shot like it was her last night to live. The staff seemed to like her too, slipping her free drinks and appetizers. I mean, I guess. Kaken is a higher rank than I am, and he has more experience. Midoriya had to yell to be heard over the bone-rattling music. You're so gloomy, Deku, I thought you had gotten over that. He appreciated the sentiment, even if it was shouted into his ear at point blank. She was practically sitting on top of Midoriya. His face blushed a deep red color from the contact. Did she mean to be this flirtatious? His hand rested on her shoulder awkwardly, gently guiding her tipsy rocking trajectory away from his face. There was a drunk, but familiar and warming smile plastered across her face. Uraraka swayed back towards Midoriya, getting so close that the synthahol fumes singed his nostrils. Come dance with me. Midoriya was yanked onto the dance floor, nearly tripping over his own feet. He steadied himself and guided Uraraka towards the door. She called him a buzzkill. She was right, he thought. Uraraka was clearly too drunk to find a transporter booth in the city by herself, so Midoriya hailed a cab. A yellow hovercar stopped in front of the pair and Midoriya shepherded Uraraka inside. She giggled as she toppled onto him in the stuffy vehicle. Where am I sending us to? He waited for a response while smiling apologetically at the driver, who looked exhausted and annoyed. They weren't the first belligerent young couple of the night and probably wouldn't be his last. Uraraka mumbled something incoherent and snuggled up against Midoriya's chest. With a sigh, he gave the driver the address to his temporary housing and wrapped an arm around Uraraka. She was as soft as he remembered. They sat together in silence for about half an hour, with the low hum of the hovercar lulling them into a cozy calm. For the first time in one of the longest days of his life, Midoriya finally had the time to think and soak it all in. The assignment, Bakugo Zigo, and whatever was happening right now, it was all so overwhelming. "Do you ever miss this?" a soft voice whispered through Midoriya's involuntary flinch. The young woman in his arms shifted and looked up at him with a kind, yet somber smile. Midoriya squeezed Uraraka's arm gently. "Of course I do," he sighed, looking out the window. "I'm sorry, I don't think I can talk about this now." Uraraka hummed in response and wrapped her arms around Midoriya's waist, rousing a squeak in surprise. The driver grumbled something in 𝗏𝗏𝗏 as he eyed the pair in his rear-view mirror. Midoriya offered another apologetic smile and the driver rolled his deeply set eyes. The vehicle hummed to a stop outside a tall apartment building. Midoriya looked up at the building in awe. From the ground he couldn't even see the roof and the whole building shone like a beacon in the night. Starfleet had never housed him in such a nice place before. Uraraka was all dead weight as Midoriya hauled her out of the vehicle, thanking the driver repeatedly as the man dismissed them with a huff. Scooping Uraraka into his arms, Midoriya carried her bridal style up to the apartment. The room was incredible, larger than his house had been growing up and furnished with extremely up-to-date tech and furniture. "Ooh, the captain's suite," Uraraka said with a sing-song voice, kicking her heels off her feet. There was a gift basket on the kitchen table filled with flowers and a bottle of 𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏 whiskey. Uraraka squirmed out of Midoriya's arms and grabbed the bottle, holding it above her head like it was a trophy. She giggled something about the party continuing and rummaged through the cabinets while Midoriya searched for a card in the gift basket. The glass of whiskey was shoved into his hands and he couldn't help but grimace at the smell. The stuff was crazy expensive, only meant for special occasions, but Midoriya never liked the taste of 𝗏𝗏𝗏. Uraraka took an experimental sip and hummed with satisfaction before downing her entire glass like water. "You must have friends in high places," she said, pouring herself another full glass. "Yeah. I've been getting that a lot lately," Midoriya muttered, setting his glass down and reaching over to take Uraraka's drink away from her. "I think you've had enough for one night. Since when do you drink so much?" Lucky, she gave up her drink willingly and stumbled towards the bedroom, her fingers brushing against Midoriya's arm as she passed. The look on Uraraka's face made his heart skip a beat. Even after years of not seeing each other, she could make him feel like a schoolboy. They had this dynamic ever since they met. Uraraka was kind and unintentionally flirtatious and she would always reduce him to a shy, babbling mess. It took almost a year of knowing each other for him to finally be able to hold a conversation with her. Twiddling his thumbs nervously, Midoriya followed Uraraka to the bedroom. The young woman flung herself on the bed, giggling playfully and patting the space next to her, signaling for Midoriya to lay down next to her. He opted to sit on the very edge of the bed as far away from the intoxicated Uraraka. "It's late," Midoriya mumbled, flinching when Uraraka grabbed his hand and made him cup her cheek. "You're too nice, Deku," she nuzzled against his hand. "Come on, tell me what's on your mind." I just don't know if I can handle this kind of pressure. If it was just the captain's seat, I'm sure I would be fine, but with 𝐾𝐦. You know that we go way back, but we still can't communicate with each other at all. Now he's my second in command. How can I run a starship smoothly when I know I'm going to have to fight 𝐾𝐦 about every decision I have to make? I have a week before the debrief to try to talk to him, but I doubt he'll let me even look at him. It's impossible to have a relationship with 𝐻. I know what you mean. Uraraka blurted out, cutting Midoriya off mid-sentence. That man is impossible to have a relationship with. He doesn't listen. He won't have a meaningful conversation. There was never an us, only him. An us. Midoriya stammered. He felt like his brain just short-circuited. "Did you date 𝐾𝐦?" "It was a mistake," she grumbled, letting go of Midoriya's hand and letting her head fall back onto the pillow. "I saw him as a challenge. I mistook his behavior for respect, an acknowledgement of my abilities, my competence, but was like everything else, just another facet of his hang-ups. You were better than Katsuki in almost every way." Midoriya grimaced, not wanting to think too deeply into Uraraka's words. He stood up with a sigh, turning to look back at the first woman he had loved as she drifted off to sleep. Midoriya got a glass of water and quietly placed it on the nightstand, taking a moment to brush some hair out of Uraraka's face. A small chirp from Midoriya's communicator broke the silence and he answered it as he left the room, closing the door behind him. "This is Midoriya. I only have a few seconds to talk, but I want to let you know," a kind voice said. "Young man, I am so proud of you, All Might." And Midoriya's words wavered as tears collected at the corners of his eyes as a flurry of mixed emotions washed over him. "Thank you for everything you've done for me, but, no buts, young Midoriya," All Might interjected. "I know you have what it takes to be a great captain, you just need a chance to show everyone what you're capable of. Here's your chance." "But All Mig, I sent you a bottle of Aldebaran whiskey for a reason. Take this week to settle your nerves. Good luck, young Midoriya." Midoriya followed All Might's advice as he let Uraraka drag him around town, bar after bar, night after night, for the rest of the week. The days leading up to the debriefing sped by in a blur of flashing light and sickly sweet mixed drinks. It was exhausting and uncomfortable, but it successfully got his mind off of Bikugu and the rest of his upcoming challenges. The morning of the debriefing, Midoriya woke up with a throbbing headache, dry mouth, and completely scorched vocal cords. He didn't fare well from sleeping on the couch. A twinge stabbed right in the small of his back and the sheets had been pulled off of him somehow. Uraraka's soft snores could be heard from across the apartment in Midoriya's bedroom, where she had been crashing the entire week. He tossed 2 slices of bread into the toaster and tiptoed into his room to find his new red command uniform in the closet. There was a lump in Midoriya's throat that he couldn't push down. He never thought he would be wearing red or commanding his own starship. Midoriya couldn't recognize himself in the mirror. A soft groan pulled him out of his thoughts and he turned to look down at the sleeping woman in his bed. Uraraka mumbled something in her sleep and Midoriya smiled. They had ended on good terms and were still close friends, but there was still a part of him, probably a part of her too, that wondered what could have been. That door was closed. It would be unprofessional to be intimately involved with a subordinate. On his way out the door, he reached for the toaster, only to find it empty. Figures. He grabbed his whiskey, practically an extension of his hand at this point, and took a large gulp. It warmed the pit of his stomach and burned his throat. He was ready as he'd ever be. Midoriya sat rigid in his chair, focusing on the wall opposite of him, not moving a muscle. The Rear Admiral's office had interesting decor. There were racy photos on the wall, definitely a violation of Starfleet standards. Bikugu slouched in a chair no more than 1 meter away. Rear Admiral Namuri Kayam gained the nickname, Midnight, within a week of her introduction to Starfleet. No one could pin down the origin, but there were theories. None that could be said in mixed company. Her reputation definitely preceded her, even for an Orion. The Rear Admiral hadn't arrived yet and the 2 men sat alone in the room. The tension was so heavy between them it was almost tangible. Bikugu was visibly annoyed, his leg bouncing up as he fidgeted in impatient frustration. Midoriya felt his red-eyed side glare scorching a hole in his side. Midoriya felt nauseous. "You look like 𝐬𝐡. Good to see you too," Midoriya mumbled back. Bikugu's glare was as harsh as ever, but if anyone could find a way to escalate a scowl past its limit, it was him, and he did. The door suddenly flung open and Midoriya stiffened in his chair, forcing his face into a calm and collected state. The Rear Admiral strutted into the office, and Midoriya couldn't stop himself from staring. A vintage uniform, a red, skin-tight dress, a skirt with too much peeking out and thigh-high black boots that clicked against the ground with each step. Her sweet-smelling perfume filled the room and was so strong it muddied his thoughts. Midnight dropped a large LTHR chair with a subtle bounce and set down 2 pads on the desk in front of her, sliding them over to Midoriya and Bikugu. Without hesitation, Bikugu scooped up the PADD and began scrolling through the crew manifest. "I don't want to waste your time, so I'm just going to cut right to the chase," Midnight opened, a smirk seeding at the corner of her lips. "It's a straightforward mission. They're a package at Deep Space Nine. Pick it up and transport it to the science outpost on Keswick 4. They'll be expecting your arrival within the month." The Rear Admiral tapped Midoriya's untouched PADD and he picked it up, flashing an abashed smile. Midnight dove into the mission details while he thumbed through the names of his new crew. A few names stood out immediately: Ochako Uraraka, Momo Yaoyorozu, Denki Kaminari, all familiar classmates from the academy. Midoriya did his best to familiarize himself with the names and faces as he continued to scroll. This was his crew. His crew. Even with Bikugu in immediate proximity, a giddy smile tugged at the corners of Midoriya's whiskey-chapped lips. This was really happening. He was actually going to be a starship captain. Midoriya scrolled until he found a particularly interesting face, his soon-to-be science officer. Pointed ears, a stone-cold expression, and a handsome face with a shock of red and white hair, Shoto Todoroki, he whispered to himself, skimming his credentials. What the hell is this? Bikugu hissed, tossing the PADD back onto the desk. Everyone on this list is practically a teenager. Even this science officer is young. For a Vulcan. And Midnight prodded, testing his temper. And Bikugu snapped back. You bet this is bullshit. You go back to that PADD right now, and bump you back down to ensign, Mr. Bikugu. It felt like all of the air in the room was blown out of an airlock. You are speaking to a superior officer and you will act like it. Midnight's presence filled the room, enticing, terrifying, and very strong to read. Count your blessings, kid. These are some of the brightest young recruits I've seen in years, several of them handpicked directly from Red Squad. If you're upset about your current arrangement, she gestured at Midoriya, who wanted no part in this. Then you will be in for a very rude awakening. If these students continue to advance at their current pace, then get comfortable with your rank, Commander. You'll be in it for an extended stay. That threw Midoriya back, but not nearly as much as Bikugu's response, pure and utter silence. He was a crackling pile of rage and embarrassment, but for once, he was at a complete loss for words. A retaliating explosion would do no help for him. With a quirk like hers, the Rear Admiral could have him out like a light and in a Federation holding cell with the literal flick of a wrist. Pick up the package, proceed to your destination, and do the drop. Bikugu audibly ground his teeth. You are dismissed, officers. Midoriya stood up, pivoted towards the exit, and swiftly walked out. Bikugu picked himself up shortly after, muttering through a scowl as he trudged his way towards the open archway. Oh, and Commander. Midnight added as the door whooshed shut, try yoga. She burst out in a giggling fit as a deafening blast shook the office from behind the door. Midoriya started down the hallway, stiff as he felt Bikugu's presence standing the hairs on the back of his neck on end. The PADD buzzed softly in Midoriya's hand as he continued to flip through his crew manifest. He took note of the ages. Bikugu had been right, they were all extremely young. The youngest, 𝐀𝐦, was only 18. Save for Bikugu, Midoriya was the oldest human on board. It was a weird feeling. Oi, shitty Deku. Bikugu's gruff voice tore Midoriya from his thoughts. Why yes. He intended for an even tone, but it came out as a squeak. Just like that, Midoriya was slammed to the ground. Midoriya landed with a painful thud, his head colliding into the wall behind him. He pulled for a breath, but the wind was knocked out of him. It felt like the Borg all over again, but it wasn't. He was caught by surprise, but he shouldn't have been. It wasn't a surprise. Like always, it was Bikugu. His smoking fists were clenched white as he loomed over Midoriya with a feral, bare-toothed death glare. One for all could swat him away like a fly, but Midoriya knew he couldn't bring himself to make a move. After all of these years, nothing had changed. One for all aside, Bikugu still had all of the power. Midoriya put his hands up defensively. Don't think for 1 second that I'm going to respect you just because you're the captain. Bikugu seethed. It was clear that getting word captain out of his mouth caused him physical pain. The moment you slip up, I'm dragging your butt out of that chair. I'm better than you in every way, never forget that. The second in command was shaking with rage, but Midoriya could see frustrated tears at the corners of his eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but Bikugu was already turning the corner down the hallway, palms cracking and popping along the way. The starship Yuuei, a fresh-off-the-line Intrepid-class starship. Midoriya couldn't keep himself from nerding out over every tiny detail of the starship. His starship. Slick, clean, shining metal. He ran his fingers lightly over the walls as he made his way down the hallway, his head so deep in thought that he ran right into another person, nearly knocking them over. Midoriya stumbled backward as two large hands grabbed and steadied him. One warm. The other, ice cold. I am so sorry. Midoriya yelped, staring at the blue uniform before scanning up to the expressionless face looking down at Todoroki's face. While walking, your gaze was fixated on the walls, Captain, Todoroki stated in monotone. I recommend narrowing your line of sight down the hallway or to the floor to detect obstacles. This should mitigate further incidents. He placed his hand on Midoriya's shoulder and goosebumps shot up his arm. A Vulcan, showing me compassion. He thought, incredulously. Todoroki's hand scooted Midoriya off to the side by his shoulder and continued down the hallway. A Vulcan. Midoriya sighed, showing me compassion. I guess it was too good to be true. When Todoroki disappeared into the turbo lift, the captain clutched his chest, trying to calm his heart and remember how to breathe. Midoriya stayed frozen until he heard the turbolift open again, then continued towards the bridge. Settling his nerves and focusing on his breaths, he walked onto the bridge for the very first time. The circular room of the bridge was breathtaking, the walls lined with glowing computer stations that chirped and beeped quietly, floors covered in a dark gray material with blue lights illuminating the pathways through each station. There were two dark LTHR chairs in the center of the bridge, one slightly larger than the other. This was his. Captain on the bridge, a voice called out, prompting a uniformed rise, turn, and salute from the dozen or so officers in the room. Impressive, but overwhelming. The voice came from a short woman with bright pink skin, golden eyes with black scaras, and two small horns. Midoriya instantly recognized her from the manifest as Ensign Mina Ishido, his new helmsman. His stomach twisted into knots as he scanned the rest of his bridge crew: Koji Koda the communications officer, Fumikage Tokoyami the flight controller, Tetsu his tactical officer, and Mizo Shoji his navigator. For better or worse, he had met his science officer and third-in-command, Shoto Todoroki, in the hallway. Midoriya waved his hand to dismiss the other crew members and they all sat down at their posts as he made his way to the captain's chair. Todoroki arrived on the bridge shortly after Midoriya sat down. Then came Commander Bakugo, his face twisted into its usual scowl. The short-fused firecracker dropped into the chair next to the captain, muttering an inaudible, resentful greeting as he familiarized himself with the controls around him. All stations check in, Midoriya commanded, adjusting himself in his chair to sit up straight. Each crewman reported their status, all readings were normal and ready to go. Midoriya pushed a small button on his control panel to contact engineering. His former classmate, Momo Yaoyorozu, was the chief engineer. He couldn't have been more excited to have her on his ship. She had finished first in their class at the academy and went on to study under MSTR ship designer, the Geordi LaForge, in the flesh immediately after graduation. Yaoyorozu was extremely intelligent, her credentials were nothing short of exceptional, and her versatile quirk made her an invaluable asset to have. Midoriya was surprised that she wasn't the one in the captain's chair. "We're ready to go when you are, Captain," Yaoyorozu's voice sounded over the intercom. Midoriya's face lit up, he couldn't contain the excitement. "All right crew, it's time to go beyond." Midoriya beamed and Bakugo rolled his eyes. "Tokoyami, smash it." "Smash it, Captain." Tokoyami inquired. "Why yes Commander, engage." "Yes sir." Midoriya, hands clamped to his armrests, held back a giggle as space stretched around the ship like a warping sheet of starlight. And like the crack of a cosmic WHP, they were off, and on their way to DS9. It was a 10-day cruise to Deep Space Nine, but Midoriya wanted to pace himself with a 2-day layover before proceeding to the Keswick 4 drop point. Much to his surprise, everything had been running smoothly. Bakugo hadn't made too much of a fuss the entire trip, save for his usual shoves, glares, and grunts, and he hadn't questioned any of the captain's decisions so far. Midoriya kept his guard up anyway. The first bridge cruise meeting had gone relatively well, although Bakugo had been absent for the last half of it. Midoriya had the chance to meet most of his crew, wander the corridors of his starship, and familiarize himself with all the various stations on board. He tracked down their 2 holodecks and had time to test out some of its pre-installed programs. When the Yuuei docked, Midoriya gave the crew ample time to enjoy the amenities while the package was carefully loaded onto their ship. Despite the recent disappearance of their station captain, Benjamin Sisko, to a cryptically reported quirk/wormhole incident, Midoriya met several of the crew members, who seemed to be taking the loss surprisingly well. Some rumored that he was alive, in some manner of speaking, and the mood on the station seemed to reflect that. Midoriya wandered through the promenade, watching children run through the catwalks, his ensigns absorbing Bajoran cultural experiences, and Yaoyorozu socializing in a Ferengi-owned bar. "I know it's a big change for you too, I'm so glad you accepted the position." Yaoyorozu shouted over the sound of the Dabo tables to be heard. Denki Kaminari sat across from her at a cramped table in Quark's bar. His partner, Hanta Siro, sat next to him with a strained smile. It had taken a lot of convincing for Siro to agree to leave his home at DS9 and move with Kaminari to the Yuuei. He wasn't thrilled with the idea of living on a starship. Siro wasn't even sure how his partner had managed to get the job offer in the first place. Kaminari had barely made it into Starfleet Academy, but quickly befriended Yaoyorozu, who had been kind enough to tutor him almost every single day. She had originally been drawn to him because of his quirk, but after a short time, a strong friendship blossomed. Yaoyorozu had pulled a lot of strings to get Kaminari a position on board the Yuuei. It was a point of extreme gratitude with a creeping burden of inadequacy. He didn't deserve to be there, but he was, and for what lacked in intellectual ability, he made up for in a rugged determination. "You know I couldn't turn this down, not after everything you did to get me the position. I owe you big time, Momo." Kaminari had a goofy grin on his face. He had wanted to be an engineer for years, but mathematics had never been his strong suit. A oddly short, Ferengi with large, dark spherical lumps covering his scalp approached the table with a plate of watered-down drinks, creeping a poorly hidden peek at Yaoyorozu, who responded with a glare. "I can't believe I'm losing 2 of my best customers." He whined in a poor attempt at flattery. "A slip of gold-pressed latinum. For old time's sake." Yaoyorozu left the table and visited Dabo tables while her friends continued to chat amongst themselves. Tetsu passed by unnoticed by his new crewmates as he made his way to the bar where a light purple-haired man with a drained face sat alone, calmly nursing a Raktajino. He placed his muscular arm over the other man's shoulders with a metallic clank, causing him to jump in surprise. "Hitoshi Shinso, how's it going, man? It's been too long." Tetsu shouted into the man's ear. "Not long enough," Shinso coyly grumbled in response, shrugging the arm off his shoulder while suppressing the small smile that tugged at the corners of his lips. The tactical officer has a huge grin on his face, his sharp shark-like teeth on full display. His body was a mountain of muscle coated in an iron-strong sheath of metallic skin. His gold uniform was tight around his biceps and thighs, threatening to rip at any moment. Shinso, a field medic, had met Tetsu on station during the Dominion conflict. Trying to stay afloat in a flood of Bajoran and Klingon casualties, Shinso found comfort in Tetsu, who returned from missions in immaculate condition. No scratches, no punctures, the perfect patient. "I'm surprised you're still stationed here, Hitoshi. I thought you wanted to chase the action," Tetsu laughed, roughly patting Shinso on the back and dropping onto a stool next to him. "You're thinking of yourself, besides I'm being transferred today." "Really? Finally gonna settle down on a planet?" Tetsu probed, flagging down the bartender for another drink. The last time the 2 men saw each other it was pure chaos. Tetsu had done his best to ground Shinso, who struggled to keep himself together under the pressure. The medic had sworn he would leave Starfleet as soon as the conflict was over and retire to a life of reassuring predictability. He was surprised Tetsu had remembered that. "No. A starship," Shinso responded, pausing to take a large swig of his drink. "What about you? Back to the front lines?" "No, actually, 𝗧𝗧𝗧 smirked, resting his cheek in his hand and leaning closer to his old friend, a Starship. 𝗀𝐻 raised his eyebrows and glanced back at the man in his bubble. He kept a straight face but was cheering on the inside. It had been about a year since the two had worked together. Due to the nature of his quirk, 𝗀𝐻 had a difficult time maintaining relationships. Most kept their guard up around him, keeping interaction to a minimum, driven by an unwarranted fear of paralysis, brainwashing, and the other rumors surrounding 𝗀𝐻. 𝗧𝗧𝗧 had been the exception. He had actually gone out of his way to talk to 𝗀𝐻 regularly when they were stationed together. "So I'm going to be stuck with you again." 𝗀𝐻 groaned, a tug-of-war between apathy and endearment pulling him in both directions. "What a pain." 𝗧𝗧𝗧 burst into a hearty laugh, pulling 𝗀𝐻 into a tight side hug as he loudly demanded a round for everyone in the bar. The patrons erupted in cheers that echoed through the promenade. The 2-day layover at Deep Space Nine flew by. Before they knew it, the Yuuei was loaded with its cargo, new crew members, and was ready to proceed to the 𝐘𝐧𝐭 𝐖𝐴. Midoriya felt confident that the trip to 𝐘𝐧𝐭 𝐖𝐴 would run smoothly. 5 days into the journey, he was relaxed in his captain's chair, sipping on a warm cup of coffee as he gazed out at the endless stars on the view screen. His armrest was unusually warm, it was a soothing sensation. Commander 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was slouched in his own chair, tapping his fingers impatiently against the side of his leg, going stir-crazy. Midoriya reached for his coffee. The cup was empty. Odd, he needed to pace himself. "Why are we at warp 6? 𝗵𝘃𝗀 complained, shooting Midoriya a look. "We have a 997 limit, but you're dragging our feet. There's no reason to rush this mission." Todoroki stated, not bothering to look at the commander. "We are estimated to arrive within the time allotted, when the 𝐘𝐧𝐭 delegation expects us, I might add." "This isn't a goddamn leisure cruise," 𝗵𝘃𝗀 snapped, craning his neck to look at the Vulcan behind him. "You're wasting our time, my time. Maintaining maximum warp for an extended duration would put an unnecessary strain on the warp core, Commander. This is a brand new ship. It can handle it. It would be illogical to go change our mission parameters only to satisfy for impatience. What the F did you say, you pointy-eared BSTRD?" Todoroki and 𝗵𝘃𝗀 continued to go on like siblings in a backseat argument. The commander's explosive insults didn't faze the Vulcan officer. The bridge crew did their best to focus on their stations. None of them were used to their superior officers having such an open confrontation, a strategic debate to Todoroki, a battle of principle to 𝗵𝘃𝗀. They expected the captain to shut down the argument immediately, but Midoriya's weak pleas to "calm down" were a fly on the windshield. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 had made it clear through his actions that Midoriya's rank meant nothing, which pushed Todoroki. Although he'd never show it, a small seed of suppressed frustration almost rose to his surface. The workload of orienting a new crew had prevented him from meditating for days. A scheduling adjustment would suffice. The Vulcan wasn't sure what to make of the young captain. He found it odd that Starfleet had selected such a skittish man, but it wasn't his place to cast judgment. Todoroki also questioned the decision to assign 𝗵𝘃𝗀 to the same ship as Midoriya. Their records revealed a clear pattern of conflict and an extensive, rocky history. He guessed that Starfleet intended this to be a learning experience for Midoriya, who seemed to lose all confidence when it came to his second-in-command. It was not logical. Not in the slightest. Across the room, one of Shoji's tentacles formed a mouth. As the lieutenant kept his eyes intently focused on the view screen, the spontaneously formed mouth pointed itself towards Midoriya. "Captain, I don't know exactly what I'm seeing. I'm getting extremely strange readings. Directly starboard." "Mr. Todoroki," Midoriya replied, "can you determine its makeup? Its origin?" Midoriya's demeanor changed from relaxed to on alert. Todoroki turned his attention back to his station as the command hissed another insult under his breath. The Vulcan paused before answering. "I'm not sure what it is, Captain. It's a completely uncatalogued anomaly. Tokoyami, drop us out of warp. Let's put some space between us and that thing. I want to be cautious." "Captain." The indicators on Todoroki's station flared into a fritz of flashes and calm chirps as a shockwave rattled the starship, nearly knocking Midoriya from his seat. What the hell was that? Bakugo hissed, more irritated than concerned. Captain, the anomaly is advancing towards us. Shoji announced, his voice laced with worry. Evasive maneuvers. Tokoyami, get us out of here. Warp 9. 75, Midoriya shouted as another shockwave shook the ship. The helm is unresponsive, Captain. Red alert. Yaoyorozu, that last hit rattled the warp core. We're working to get it back online. All I can give you is impulse. Midoriya cursed through gritted teeth as he broke into a cold sweat up against an unknown threat, a swift that would be their best option. There wasn't time to think. Captain, I have visual. Helmsman Ishido exclaimed on screen, helmsman. It was huge, like a massive tear in space, spanning at least $10, and something was emerging from it. A writhing swarm, thousands of black and red striped tentacles, dozens of kilometers in length, were protruding out of the anomaly, approaching through the vacuum of space at a blistering speed. Midoriya froze, his stomach twisting into knots as he stared at the entity through the viewscreen. One tentacle shot out ahead of the rest, slamming the hull and sending another shockwave through the decks. Bakugo leaped up from his chair, hands balled into tight, smoking fists. Ready the photon torpedoes. The commander yelled, stepping forward with his eyes locked on the view screen. It is not your place to make commands, Todoroki responded, mild irritation slipping into his words despite his efforts. We're not in any position to fight this thing. We don't know if torpedoes will even work on it. Midoriya argued. Yaoyorozu, status. Bakugo whipped around and grabbed Midoriya by the collar. We can't run. The warp core is shot, you idiot. Now grow a pair and strike first. Todoroki leaped into action, seizing and cranking the commander's wrist until it released Midoriya's collar. Bakugo threw a fist at the Vulcan's face, but he dodged it easily, grabbing his other wrist. Ice erupted from Todoroki's right hand, covering Bakugo's forearms and freezing his hands together. Bakugo shot away and cranked back, looking like the pulled-back hammer of a gun, ready to knock out the whole room in one devastating burst, but he stopped, doubled over in frustration, and let out a BLD-curdling yell. On the ground, Bakugo's quirk was incredible, he was unbeatable. Here, trapped in an airtight tin can, thousands of years from civilization at sublight speed, an explosion would put the mission, along with the lives of all its participants, to an abrupt end. Midoriya took a deep, shaky breath. The walls were closing in. There wasn't enough air in the room. The deafening, rhythmic thud of Midoriya's heart grew until it overtook every other stimulus in the room. He was in a cold sweat. His racing, muttering thoughts were usually organized. Focused. Manageable. Now, they were a disordered pileup of fear and doubt. Attack or retreat. Run or fight. Permission to escort the commander to the brig, Captain. Todoroki's even words brought Midoriya back to reality. No need, Commander. He can stay. But Captai it's okay, Mr. Todoroki. Despite the years of emotional terrorizing, Bakugo was the only person on the bridge with first-hand experience. Midoriya couldn't afford to lose him, not now. Louder than he intended, the captain barked, Tetsu, arm the torpedoes and fire on my command. Torpedoes not responding, Captain. Phasers. Before the tactical officer could respond, the anomaly was on top of them, engulfing the ship in its tentacles, pulling it into the black abyss. Warnings blasted throughout the ship. A large crack crept across the view screen, branching out as the entity drew them in. Warning, structural integrity compromised. Hull breach imminent in 39. 38. 37-inch raise shields. Midoriya commanded desperately. Nothing is responding, Captain. 22. 21. 20. Yaoyorozu, I need shields. He strained to keep his voice steady. The crew was young, inexperienced, and in a panic. He was the captain. It was time to step up. Pages. We need weapons. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 growled, struggling to break out of Todoroki's ice. Down in engineering, everything was chaos. A cascade of power failures and blown relays followed every shockwave. Station's panels exploded through the corridors, igniting fires and sending shrapnel flying everywhere. Despite her best effort, Yaoyorozu was fighting a losing battle. Her quirk compensated for the busted replicator, but the demand for replacement parts put too much strain on her. Kaminari carried her from station to station, where she squeezed every last ounce of energy she had into repairs. She was on the verge of passing out when the captain demanded shields. Kaminari wasn't faring much better, jump-starting circuits left and right took its toll, his eyes started to glaze over as a wave of pleasant delirium began to overtake his last coherent thoughts. Yaoyorozu can only give you one. He forced out of his mouth with as much focus as he could muster. Weapons. Shields. Both stations were badly damaged and they were running out of time. The captain and commander yelled at the same time, in a jumble of conflicting commands. Shield/weapons. Kaminari barely sifted out the captain's voice. Aye, sir. Kaminari shouted, dragging Yaoyorozu the shield controls and helping her pry it open. The brain-fried officer watched the chief engineer nervously, wishing he could be more helpful. Deafening alarms filled every corner of the room, muffling the of injured crew members. The scent of burning flesh clouded his mind even further. He could feel panic rise through his body, or maybe it was vomit. Kaminari wondered how the half-conscious chief engineer could stay so calm and collected. Maybe she just didn't have time to worry. Yaoyorozu got the shields back online with astounding speed, but the ship was still immobile. Halfway through the dark abyss they had avoided being crushed, if that was a bright side. Kaminari tugged Yaoyorozu to the weapons system, setting her down gently in front of the access panel. There was smoke leaking out of the edges of the metal plate and it was hot to the touch. There must have been a plasma leak on the other side, accessing it wasn't an option. We need weapons. 𝗵𝘃𝗀's voice sounded over the intercom. We can't, Kaminari replied, looking around for another option. His eyes met with Yaoyorozu's. He could tell from her expression that she had an idea. Captain, she exhaled into the comm, if we use a focused burst from Kaminari's quirk we can spike the warp core, reverse shield polarity, give the entity a good jolt. And slip free while it's confused. The ship slipped past the wall of darkness, jutting out of the other side of the tear. Do it. The lights surged as Kaminari's electricity hit the grid, blowing fuses and running a charge through the bulkheads. Midoriya could feel the crisp, ionized air as his hair tingled and stood on end. He had no idea Kaminari was so powerful. In addition to lights, replicators, and control panels, even unconnected pads, communicators, and tricorders fried throughout the ship. The captain looked at the view screen in awe as the shield bubble buzzed to a warm, fluid glow. Occasional bolts creeping their way across, like an aurora and thunderstorm wrapped into one magnificent package. The tentacles became seized violently as its hold of the starship faltered. Sections of the long tendrils popped in and out of their places in instantaneous, unpredictable flashes, almost a glitch-like movement. I've regained helm control. Tokoyami announced as soon as the ship slipped from the entity's grasp. Full reverse. Midoriya commanded, we have to go back through the tear before it's gone, Shoji responded, staring down at his view screen in a speechless shock. The tear is gone, Midoriya heart dropped. The room was silent. Please, not this. His hands kneaded into each other to suppress his shakes. Not now, things could be fine. This could all be a misunderstanding, a short distance jump, a simple peek in and out of an event horizon, but if it wasn't, tears welled up in Midoriya's eyes. I thought I was past this. They're looking to me. Captains don't cry. He drew in a deep, shaky breath, held it in as he pushed the panic down, and let the breath out as the room cleared and his focus returned. Shoji, figure out our location. Staring at her screen with wide eyes, Mina replied in a gasp, Captain, the stars are gone. On screen, she was right. Midoriya looked up at the main viewer, nothing. After a pause, the captain stood out of his chair and centered himself. Lieutenant Shoji, please investigate our location. Lieutenant 𝐀𝐦, please contact Dr. 𝗫𝐶 to treat the injuries in engineering and activate the emergency medical hologram. Everyone else, Midoriya needed time to determine next steps. Take 5. Permission to confine the first officer to his quarters, Captain. Todoroki proposed, hands still on Byakugan, ice creeping past his elbows and he was visibly trembling. Not yet. I can see Frostbite taking his entire hand. Please escort him to sickbay and find a dermal regenerator. Aye, Captain. Midoriya exited the bridge in a fast walk-turn-sprint as soon as the turbolift doors closed behind him. After a short walk to his quarters, he slipped past the archway, impatiently bobbing up and down on the ball of his feet as the doors closed behind him, taking longer than usual. Computer, restrict external door access and insulate sound from leaving the room for the next 5 minutes. The door locked with a click and Midoriya flopped face down on his mattress, letting out a choking sob. He felt weak, childish, and incompetent. This was a straightforward mission. If anyone could ruin it, it was him. It was all going to hell. Byakugan was right. Midoriya removed his comm badge and placed it on his nightstand before curled tightly into his bedsheet. His puffy, bloodshot eyes grew heavy and eventually eased closed. He drifted off to sleep. Midoriya let out a stretching groan as he pulled himself out of a groggy stupor. The door chirped as he blindly fiddled around the nightstand, eyes still closed, trying to locate his comm badge. He flopped his hand back to remove his bedsheet cocoon but found it bunched up on the opposite corner of the bed. The cold air roused a wave of goosebumps to float over the surface of his skin. The door chirped again. It had been chirping for some time now, Midoriya inferred. Captain, your door is locked and you have not responded to my several attempts to contact you. Do you require assistance? Todoroki's voice could be heard through the door. Midoriya tried to hop up, falling out of the bed, a yelp and a loud thud. Computer open door, authorization Shoto 587. Whoa, wait Todoroki. The door whooshed open and the Vulcan stepped inside, scanning for Midoriya at eye level before glancing down. But in the air, legs still hugging the side of the bed, and torso splayed across the floor. The captain flushed a deep scarlet as Todoroki an eyebrow at the sight. Do you require assistance, Captain? He repeated, taking a step towards him. No. I'm fine, Midoriya groaned, letting the rest of his body fall to join him on the floor before propping himself up and straightening his uniform. Your presence is required on the bridge. Alright, I'll be right there. Midoriya rummaged for his comm badge, which had somehow made its way under a stack of books. He was greeted on the bridge by a condensed diagram of the long-range scanner's findings displayed on the view screen. Have you determined our location, Shoji? That's a work in progress, Captain. We've detected stars in several directions, but none of them correspond to any of our records. And to starboard, there's still nothing in sight at all. Midoriya clenched his jaw. And, that's not all, Captain, Shoji added, searching for words. This place I don't understand how, but it's a junkyard, a cemetery. There are ships littering space as far as our scanners can detect. Midoriya centered himself. There was hope. Mr. 𝐀𝐦, hail them. There's no point, Captain, none of them show any life signs. Todoroki stated, taking the initiative to scan their surroundings. We appear to be trapped within the anomaly. He bit his lip. What was this place? This wasn't a junkyard, it was light years across, probably larger, and that wasn't the oddest part. The ships, however they had gotten there, came in an endless variety of classes, cultures, and time periods, many of them familiar. Klingon birds of prey. Extremely aged Vulcan cruisers. Even Jem'Hadar and Kazon vessels from the Gamma and Delta quadrants. Some flickered ominously in the darkness. None of them appeared to be operational. Nearby, a mass of clutter and lost craft orbited a small red planet, forming a ring. A blip showed up on the scanner. Captain. I'm actually picking up a distress signal from the planet's surface, 𝐀𝐦 reported, pulling the image upon the view screen. Midoriya swallowed thickly, hesitant to sink the crew deeper into this unfolding disaster. "I guess we have no choice," he muttered to himself, clearing his throat and straightening his posture. "𝗧𝗧𝗧, you're with me. Todoroki, you have the bridge." Midoriya tapped his comm badge. "Uraraka, meet me in the transporter room. We're going to the surface." They beamed down on the red planet in heavy environmental suits. It was a Class R world, no atmosphere, no water, no heat or light, completely inhospitable. It was a bone-chilling -243 degrees Celsius, freezer burning the surface of the away team's skin through the suits. Red minerals jutted out of the ground like jagged, razor-sharp stalagmites. One wrong move could slice through an O2 line if they didn't keep their distance. Puddles of liquid helium sublimated behind them as their boots left sizzling footprints. Midoriya's hopes of finding a living person here dwindled with each crackling step. He looked down at his tricorder, following the distress signal through the wasteland. The junkyard wasn't limited to the orbital ring. As they closed in on the signal, more and more shipwrecks appeared in their path. 𝗧𝗧𝗧 stopped abruptly and a distracted Midoriya rammed into his back. Groaning, they collided with a metallic clank. Uraraka gasped at the sight before them, a Federation starship. It was impaled on the crimson spikes, at a crooked angle, and the metal hull frosted over and coated in a thick layer of crimson dust. The ship's identification number was impossible to read. It must have been here for decades. Maybe longer, Midoriya pondered. The distress signal was coming from inside. "Scan for life signs," Midoriya mumbled in awe, unable to tear his gaze away from the ship. Uraraka looked up from her tricorder, putting a hand on his shoulder. I'm not picking up any life. Wait, do you hear that?" 𝗧𝗧𝗧 whispered before taking a few steps forward. A muffled noise was coming from the ship. Like a voice, barely audible, and music. Before Midoriya could react, 𝗧𝗧𝗧 charged into the ship through a breach in the hull. Uraraka pulled out her phaser and ran in after him, not waiting for instructions and leaving Midoriya trailing behind them. When he ducked under the frostbitten metal opening, the officer's footsteps echoed ominously through the dark halls of the ship. Cables hung loosely from open panels in the walls. Dust and rock had been tracked inside, evidence that someone else had been here. The away team weaved through the maze-like corridors, following the soft noise until they arrived at the bridge. An eerie light was flickering from inside. The door was ripped from its track and a huge spike tore the floor. Ruby-colored pebbles evenly dusted floor. A broken hologram weakly projected into the center of the room, its image sputtering and degrading to gibberish. 𝗧𝗧𝗧 entered the room first, his feet crunching red pebbles as he made his way towards the hologram. A subtle movement caught Midoriya's eye. 𝗧𝗧𝗧. The captain called out, as the pebbles shifted towards him. It all happened in an instant. The red pebbles surrounded and coated the tactical officer, encasing both feet in a thick layer of mineral and proceeding up his body. 𝗧𝗧 cried out, immobilized as the rock hardened into a shell around his body, climbing higher and higher until only his head poked out. His eyes were wide, staring at Midoriya and Uraraka with desperation as his stone prison locked his lungs from expanding. With a frantic wheeze escaping his lungs, he was gone, encased in that material. A fracture appeared over 𝗧𝗧𝗧's mouth and the stone pushed inwards, breaking though his helmet as the stone forced its way into his mouth. The material melted into one another, creating a perfectly smooth statue. With a crackle of green bolts, Midoriya burst forward in full cowling. Uraraka's warning to be careful fell on deaf ears. "I won't let him down." Midoriya whipped around and poured everything he had into one solid kick. "I have to break through. I have to save him." Right before contact, the red statue shifted, raising an arm up to block Midoriya's kick. The blow landed on its forearm, triggering a string of fractures to ripple over its surface. 𝗧𝗧𝗧's face peeked through the cracks. The captain clenched his fist, electricity encompassing the limb as he sent a punch towards the statue's chest. Its other arm shot up, and Midoriya's fist landed into its open palm, sending another ripple of cracks through its body. The hand snapped closed around the captain's fist, its jagged surface puncturing his suit and digging painfully into his skin. He could feel the stone growing around his wrist. In a panic, Midoriya leaped back, and the statue mirrored his movement, bounding forward. The jerk sent more cracking shockwaves through the surface, giving space for 𝗧𝗧𝗧's leg to break free. Midoriya ripped the stone arm back, deshelling a gasping 𝗧𝗧𝗧. The freed tactical officer grasped his throat as he fell to his knees, eyes rolling back into his head. Uraraka ran to 𝗧𝗧𝗧's side, slapping a respiratory regulator over his mouth. A small force field buzzed online, enveloping his head with a pocket of pressurized O2. The tactical officer's wheezing slowly evened out. His eyes were filled with burst capillaries and he was visibly shaken. A medical tricorder chirped as Uraraka confirmed her hopes, no permanent damage. With the reassurance that his officer was unharmed, Midoriya turned back to the creature in front of him, now an empty broken shell. His breath hitched as he watched it transform, the fractures were sealing themselves. The stone shifted in color, transitioning from red to a color matching Midoriya's skin tone. It slowly crept from head to toe, easing to a halt at the top of its head. Divots settled where eyes would be, forming red eyes that moved independently from one another with little coordination until they settled on Midoriya. Its lower jaw twitched, the corners of its mouth fractured up to the base of its ears. The stone ground against itself as the jaw opened and closed experimentally. Ma. Ma, it tried to speak, its voice was raspy and dry. Mama. Midoriya stiffened up. Staring uncomfortably at the creature quickly refined into a humanoid form. Ma. Man, what a manly move, its mouth twisted into a wide grin. The cracks and rough edges had smoothed out except for a small fracture above its right eye. Jagged red spikes protruded from the top of its head, mimicking hair. The creature had managed to copy every inch of 𝗧𝗧𝗧, from his thick muscles to his sharp teeth, to other details. Uraraka averted her eyes from the naked creature. It released Midoriya's arm and raised its hands to its face, wiggling the newly formed fingers. The fingers curled into fists in a gravelly, grinding motion. The frigid cold seeped into Midoriya's suit through the tears the alien had made. His skin frosted over as the cold stabbed into his arm with excruciating stings, followed by numbness to the bone. He slapped his hand over the openings and squeezed down tightly, trying his best to seal them off. Dude, you just, bolted in to save your friend, the creature continued with animated gestures, the way you hit me and it was just like, crack. And how you dash, he pointed at Uraraka, just leaped into action too. You both jumped in with full determination. That was amazing. So macho, so manly. The away team was frozen in stunned silence, watching the newly formed creature ramble on. Uraraka stealthily turned her tricorder towards the alien, lightly chirping as it scanned. He winced as if he could feel the scan penetrating his surface and turned towards the woman, eyes wide with curiosity. What's that? He asked with a gasp, skipping over to the science officer with childlike giddiness. Midoriya's combadge chirped. Midoriya here. Captain, have you located the source of the distress signal? Todoroki inquired. The captain scanned the rundown bridge and spotted the flickering light on the captain's armrest panel. He made his way over to it and it off. I did, he responded with a sigh. Did you find any life forms? Midoriya glanced back at the alien interacting with his crewmates. He dragged Uraraka back to the bridge, where the barely functional holonovel played. The captain recognized it, the original Crimson Riot holonovels. Midoriya chuckled. Transporting himself back to the countless Saturday mornings he spent as a child watching the show, which premiered shortly before he had been born. Uraraka and 𝗧𝗧𝗧 beamed and clapped as the alien precisely mimicked every detail of the program, swelling in excitement from his first live audience. He didn't appear to be a threat anymore. Yes, Lieutenant, we did. Then it would be best if you returned to the beam-down point. We cannot get a lock on you in your current position. You are needed on board as soon as possible. There have been developments, all right, Midoriya out. The captain turned back to his crewmates. 𝗧𝗧𝗧 and the alien were having an arm wrestling contest while Uraraka was fiddling with a cracked view screen. Midoriya made his way over to his junior science officer, hands still clamped around his frozen wrist. The numbness had distracted him from the deep frostbite. I'm trying to see if I can salvage the ship's logs, Uraraka explained when she felt his presence. She was too engrossed to look up from the screen. The whole ship is dead, 𝐸𝐸. We have to go. 𝐸𝐸 was visibly frustrated, but she stood up to follow Midoriya. What about the alien? She whispered, we can't leave him here. Midoriya bit his bottom lip. I don't see an immediate threat. We'll bring him on board but under close watch. He's taken a liking to Tetsu. I'll let him know to act as our new friend's handler until further notice. She beamed up at Midoriya, her smile made his heart skip a beat. Captain, is it on? Yeah. Now say your intro, the way we talked about. Okay. Personal log, stardate. Today. Name, undetermined. Just jump into it. Sure. Well, I can't describe the beginning, at least not in meaningful terms. Warmth, shifting, a general state of being, no language, organized senses, or scaffolding to sift out meaning. Kind of like a mind soup. I may have been born, or formed, at any rate, in the last week. Or the last several thousand years, I have no way of knowing. The first phase of my life lasted for an undeterminable stretch of time, and it suddenly ended, or began. Does that make sense? Keep going bro, it's recording. Okay. Well, one moment, things were the way they had always been, and the next moment, there was a shock, a loud PND and an extreme sensation of pressure. That's when the ship hit you. I was getting to that, but yeah, that's when the ship hit me. For the first time, I felt heat, perceived light, guided my way through the nooks and crannies in the metal until I was in a darker, calmer place. I felt my way around until I must have flipped a SWCH because I was hit by a cool, moving that glowed across my surface, accompanied by a muffled sound that I couldn't have possibly understood, but filled me with excitement. It drew me in. I studied it, passively absorbing it on a loop over weeks turned years, as the stimuli gained more and more clarity, more structure. Some were softer, duller, less energetic, but others, oh man. They were booming, sharp, the flashes and sounds hit me like a massage or a kick-butt drum solo, you know. Was it the Crimson Riot Holono Dash? It was the Crimson Riot Holonovel. It was exciting and, how can I describe it? It was so manly. Exactly. It's all I knew. It was all I needed to know. Vocabulary, grammar, syntax, it was all there. I may not be the brightest. Rock. Or maybe reel it back in, bro. At any rate, I'm not the brightest guy around, but I had years to learn. A decade or two in, I had everything I needed, or, well, at least I thought. I was lonely, and, even though I didn't understand it at the time, I had no organized bodily form. I couldn't wrap my mind around things like arms, legs, fists, that whole kind of thing. I wanted to embody my hero, but it just wasn't coming together for me. And then you came along. This is my favorite part. There I am, hanging out. When these squishy, Crimson Riot-like things hobble into my bachelor pad, scuffing my floor and shifting my things. I had no idea what was going on until one of them stepped in me. You owe me a pair of shoes. This is important, man. At that moment, it all came together. The language, the movement, the badass, but kicking, manly stuff that was roaring to get out, it all clicked. I didn't know I was waiting for a physical form, I didn't know I could take one, but I did. And a handsome one at that. But yeah, there are a lot of similarities, the copy was pretty close. And yeah man, that's most of it. You know where things go from there. I'm glad you guys found me. Same here bro. Thanks Tetsu. Now are you going to teach me how to lift or not? Get out of my head. You know it, bro. Lieutenant Rikido Sato, Dr. Shinso, and Transporter Chief, Masahiro Ojiro, greeted the away team when they materialized on the Yuuei. The doctor's face briefly recoiled at the sight of Tetsu's bloodshot eyes and frostburnt cheeks. The rock alien gandered the room in awe as the away team shucked their environmental gear and Midoriya nursed his dying arm. The numbness that had pervaded the entire limb was replaced by a piercing, burning sting as it thawed. Midoriya gritted his teeth. He didn't have time to be in pain, he was needed on the bridge. ― tended to Tetsu and Uraraka called after Midoriya as he left the room. Status report. The captain called as soon as he stepped out of the turbolift. Captain, Todoroki began, our astrometric scans have confirmed my suspicions, our surroundings bear no resemblance to any recorded Federation star charts or our extrapolations of what may lay beyond their limits. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 snarled, cut to the chase. We're not in our quadrant, we're not in our galaxy, we're not even in part of the goddamned observable universe. A wave of nausea, panic, and tunnel vision hit Midoriya. The cold sweats returned in full force as he struggled to hold his composure. Todoroki raised an eyebrow, a very crude choice of words, but accurate in substance. We are incalculably far from home. The captain dragged his feet over to his chair and slumped into it, unable to speak from fear of crying. A feeling of silent terror hung over the bridge like a dark cloud. This was a package 𝗪𝗀𝗟. Why did this happen? A goddamn package 𝗪𝗪, Captain, the Vulcan's voice pulled Midoriya back from the void. He looked up, greeted by the desperate, collective gaze of the entire bridge crew, excluding Bakugo. Yes. The captain responded, wiping the sweat off his brow, your orders. Midoriya's took a deep, shaky breath, a storm of options and ideas, ranging from mediocre to outright horrible, raged in his head. Everyone was looking to him for answers, brilliant, reassuring next steps that would validate his worthiness of being a captain. This was a lose-lose, no-win scenario with no way out. Midoriya was at a loss. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Bakugo shot him a glare, rolled his eyes, and swung himself out of the chair in a motion filled with lethargic resent. We're F. Even if, and there is no if, we miraculously found the way home and shot off at top speed, we could cruise for thousands of years, millions for all we know, before even reaching anything we recognize. It doesn't matter if it's warp, transwarp, or slipstream. If we ever get home through any kind of travel, if home is even there anymore, whoever arrives there won't be us. Bakugo stated. Whoever. It would take so many generations, there wouldn't be anything resembling a human on board for the Earth to welcome back, Tokoyami mumbled, holding his head in his hands. We need to get our weapons back online, the first officer continued with an uncharacteristically cool and collected tone. Salvage what we can from the surrounding ships, it's not like they're in short supply, then we need to figure out where that tentacle BSTRD that brought us here is and hold every quantum torpedo we have to the side of its head until it sends us back to the place it stole us from. That assumes not only that we can find the entity, but that it operates on any form of organized thought or reason. Todoroki stated, typing on his PADD, we can logically deduce that our chances of return are slim to none. It is imperative that the crew have the flexibility to entertain our best course of action, don't you say it. Bakugo cut in. Todoroki continued unfazed, our best course of action, finding a suitable, M-class planet and beginning preparation for immediate settlement. If you're saying we should just give up, then you're even more of a coward than our shitty, so-called captain. I am simply stating the facts, as grim as they may be. As the pair continued to exchange explosive jabs and dispassionate rebuttals, Midoriya worked to suppress his heart. The despair on his bridge crew's faces forced the reality of the situation to sink in. Tears ran down Helmsman Ishido's cheeks as she choked on sobs. Shoji trained multiple blank eyes on the view screen while Tokoyami muttered under his breath. The rest of the crew murmured hollow reassurances and of pleas of denial to each other in hushed voices. Tetsutesu exited the turbolift with a visibly indignant ― in tow, tending to him with a dermal regenerator. The red alien entered the room, trailing them like a baby duck with a towel lazily and insecurely wrapped around his lower half. The bridge had become crowded and chaotic. Midoriya clenched his uninjured hand into a trembling fist. That's enough. He barked with unflinching resolve. The room froze. Even Bakugo briefly shut his mouth. This isn't the time to panic, you worthless piece of SHT, I'm not panic, you know what, Kaken. Shut your mouth. Midoriya hissed, now everyone pull yourselves together. Senior staff, meet me in my ready room in 5 minutes. The captain stood up and briskly left the room, passing by the doctor, who caught sight of his damaged arm and black fingers, and followed him. Midoriya groaned. He had hoped to have a brief moment alone to collect himself. "I'm fine, Shinso, you don't have to do that." "No, you are not fine." The doctor grumbled, rolling up the sleeve to inspect the damage. Midoriya winced at the touch. His entire forearm had turned completely black. Grotesque blisters dotted the dead skin, feeling like fiery hot pokers. He could feel the pain piercing all the way down to his bones. "Your arm is shot. If we were anywhere near a starbase, I would throw in the towel and fit you for a biosynthetic limb replacement, but I'll have to make do with what we have. I'm taking you to the medical bay." "What?" "No, I can't go now." Midoriya protested, cradling his arm. "Why not?" ___. He stopped mid-word as his head filled with a thick fog and his eyes glazed over. Midoriya slowly rose out of the fog to find himself sitting upright in the medbay, his arm back to its original color and Shinso bending his elbow and inspecting his wrists. "Was that so strong?" the doctor teased before dropping Midoriya's hand and waving dismissively. "I was barely able to salvage your tissues, and you're going to need several more treatments for damage this extensive, but I've done all I can for today. You're free to go." The captain mumbled a sheepish "thank you" before scooting off the table and walking out of the room. Slowly but surely, his eyes widened as the incident on the bridge sunk in. Midoriya broke into a light sprint to his ready room, doing his best to contain himself until the doors slid shut behind him. "I just told off 𝐻𝐾𝐦, I just told off 𝐻𝐾𝐦." Midoriya murmured in giddy surprise. "I can't believe it. I was at my limit. It just came out. I didn't think I had it in me." He had it several years coming, but I never in a million years. Midoriya drew in a long gasp and covered his mouth with both hands. "𝐻𝐾𝐦's going to kill me," he whimpered. "Our first mission turns into a disaster, and now this. There's no way out. A Detroit smash to the gut. He would go down, but he would come back. The next day, the next week, he would come back. I'll have to sleep with one eye open. There's nowhere to hide, not in the bulkheads. He'd find me there, not in the." He paused and slammed a fist down on the table. "I'm the captain. I have a team counting on me. I can't Jew." The doors whooshed open and Midoriya jumped, a small yelp escaping his lips. Todoroki walked in and an eyebrow at the sight. "Why does he always come in at the worst times?" "Are you all right, Captain?" the Vulcan inquired, walking over and taking a seat next to him. "I'm fine," "I'm fine," Midoriya responded, his voice cracking. "Your outburst on the bridge was surprising, to say the least," Todoroki stated, typing on his PADD, "but it was substantive and fitting." "A compliment." Midoriya blinked a few times, unsure of how to respond. The rest of the senior staff made their way into the small room. Bakugo slouched into the chair opposite from him, arms crossed. The look on his face said, "I'll kill you and PSS on your grave." Yaoyorozu took a seat on the other side of Midoriya, placing a hand on his shoulder, with a reassuring smile. Tetsu arrived last, alien in tow, with an exhausted expression. The tactical officer had wrestled him into an old jumpsuit from the cargo bay. The captain walked up to greet Tetsu's new playmate and took a look at the name sewn below the collar. "Kirishima, ha?" Midoriya inquired. "It's the name of a mountain I grew up next to." Tetsu cracked a smile. "I thought it was fitting." He beamed as he dropped into his seat. "We recorded Kirishima's first personal log and I showed him around the holodeck." The officers sat to weigh their options. Every possible course of action was addressed and, for one reason or another, only the original two options remained: pursue the tentacle entity or settle in a foreign domain with no hope of ever returning to their lives. "Before we do anything, we have to get our weapons systems back online," Tetsu said while struggling with Kirishima, who was fixated on the replicator after discovering the pattern for crimson riot-shaped pancakes. Yaoyorozu peeked up from her panel. "Weapons should be online within the next 2 hours. Wait, there's a problem. Computer, display a comprehensive scan of the tentacle entity, authorization Momo 8719. A broken scan appeared on the view screen. "I wasn't able to pull a full scan, but whatever it's composed of is completely out of phase. Conventional weapons won't have any effect. What's the problem? Rig up a tricobalt device and shove it up its octopus butt. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 interrupted, between you, the industrial replicator, and our antimatter stores, we can slap together as many warheads as we want. 𝐻𝐸 pondered for a moment and shook her head. Even if we blew it up in subspace, it wouldn't be strong enough. Nothing short of a transphasic torpedo. Wow, Kirishima sprung up with a mouthful of pancake. Transphase, you're talking about a dimensional charge. My planet is littered with ships, I've seen tons with records of those weapons. You want to blow something up, but in all directions and frequencies of subspace at once. The chief engineer looked at the alien with a dumbfounded look, then back at the PADD and up again. Yes. Then we should scan the planet and gather as much scrap tritanium as possible, she said to herself, then looked up at Midoriya. Captain, permission to perform a metallurgical scan and send an away team to the planet. Granted. Midoriya turned to his ready room. We should also salvage supplies from the other ships in orbit. 𝐻𝐸, let's piece together a wish list. Like 𝗵𝘃𝗀 said, we can salvage power sources from the surrounding ships, replicate the basic firing mechanisms, and you can take care of the components the replicator can't handle. Todoroki, please organize for away teams of 3 to scavenge the ships and have them proceed with extreme caution. Just because our sensors aren't picking up life signs doesn't guarantee we are alone out here. Aye, Captain. A loud, bellowing creak echoed down the alien corridor as 𝗵𝘃𝗀 unlatched the airlock entrance. A thick coat of dust sloughed off as his away team collectively heaved the dense hatch open. The vessel, at over twice the Yuuei size, sported an enormous gash down through its hull, which didn't match any species designs in the Federation record. Bridge to the away team, what are you seeing? Midoriya probed, held back from the mission through Shinzu's orders. It appears that this was once a passenger vessel, 𝐻𝐸 replied, tricorder in hand. She trudged through the hull in her mag boots until she located the environmental controls. These controls are shot, Commander. Ensign 𝐬𝐸 stuck close to her while 𝗵𝘃𝗀 inspected their surroundings. The abandoned ship was eerie, personal belongings of long-gone inhabitants slowly drifting through the hallway. The bulkheads were splattered with dark, purple stains that flaked off as 𝗵𝘃𝗀 passed over them through his think environmental suit. BLD. A lump forming in 𝐬𝐸's throat. There must have been an attack, then where are the bodies? 𝗵𝘃𝗀 rolled his eyes. It's obvious where most of them are. Dust is at least 70% dead cells. Look around and say hello, kid. 𝐬𝐸's lip broke into a suppressed tremble. Just then, a groan echoed down the dark corridor and sent a chill up the ensign's spine. The chief engineer withdrew her phaser, pointing it down the hallway with laser focus. The team held their breath, locked in silent battle readiness. A bead of sweat collected on 𝐻𝐸's face, stuck in place from zero gravity, and she glanced at 𝗵𝘃𝗀. His mouth was twisted into a primed smirk, ready for a fight. With this abandoned and unpressurized setting, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was finally free to stretch his legs. Computer energize EV gauntlet enhancements. He locked into battle position as sleek, white gauntlet extensions materialized onto his EV suit in 2 compact maelstrom of blinding light. 𝐻𝐸 inhaled sharply and placed her hand on 𝐬𝐸's shoulder. 𝐻𝐸 to the 𝗵𝘃𝗲, shut up, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 cut in, I've been trapped in a tin can with that whining beach of a captain for over a week. Let me have this fight. A daunting grew to occupy the floor and walls as a hatch creaked open at the end of the hall. A door creaked open and a large shadow stretched across the wall. A muffled tack echoed through the halls as the shrouded creature approached, its feet adhering to the floor. 𝗵𝘃𝗀's fingers stiffened as embers drifted from his gauntlets. The alien stepped into the light. 𝗬𝗧𝗏. It cried, shuffling behind a storage container. The commander's excited grin drooped in disappointed puzzlement as the away team peeked over at the boogeyman before them, its intimidating shadow amounting to no more than a 3-foot creature with a pug-like face. It had green, leathery skin coated in golden tattoos, with cat-like eyes and vertical eyelids. 3 carefully wrapped bodies were drifted behind it on strings, like a child's balloons. 𝐬𝐬 fumbled with the universal translator and 𝗵𝘃𝗀 scanned for weapons as it pointed and shrieked in an alien tongue. It was unarmed. Impure, it shrilled through the translator as it waddled closer. 𝐬𝐻 flinched as the alien extended a thin hand and got to work, staining him in golden paint mirroring the tattoos on its skin. The comm chirped, "Away team, what am I hearing? Is everything okay? We've encountered an alien, Captain." The little 𝐹 not a threat. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 turned on his heel and continued down the hall. "Let's keep moving." 𝐬𝐻's voice shook. "But, the bodies died from decompression over 100 years ago. I scanned them. That thing is a morbid little weirdo, but he's no 𝗧𝗎 and the wicked shall be shepherded to the cliff so that they may sustain us, so saith the Watcher on high." The alien extolled, trailing the commander, reaching a little paint-coated hand to his EV suit. "And his reach shall soar and seize those that dare sail the void and their boats and children and deliver them to this place so that his servants may adorn them with linens and—" What did he just say? 𝐬𝐬 head jerking to face the creature. "He needs to shut the F up before I blow every single one of us out in airlock." 𝗵𝘃𝗀 hissed. 𝐬𝐬 shrugged, "They must be a native scavenger species. At least we know there's life somewhere out here, for better or worse." The team spent the next hour systematically scanning the ship. Through the maze of foreign passages, a light, soothing hum emanated from behind a massive bulkhead. 𝐬𝐬 perked up. "I know that hum. Oh boy, what a steal." She navigated her way through the ship as the sound grew nearer and nearer. She rounded a final corner and lit up. "It's exactly what I thought. It's a quantum singularity drive. Like a Romulan warp core." She shrugged. "Same principle, much more alien design. It's going to take me a while to crack, but it's the perfect component to create multiple intersections in subspace. This will turn our firecracker into a frag grenade." It went over 𝗵𝘃𝗀's head, but he nodded. "Hey Deku, beam up back over. We got what we needed." Midoriya responded after a moment of radio silence. "That's great, Commander, let's bring it on and be on our way." "On our way." 𝐬𝐻 chimed in. "Where are we heading, Captain? We have no point of reference, so we're going to have to roll the dice, buddy. It's time for you all to get some res. Don't tell me when I need to rest. I'm a grown but man, Captain." 𝗵𝘃𝗀 barked. Ugh, 𝐬𝐻, get some rest, friend. You and 𝐬𝐬 earned it. I'll see you soon. Captain out. Days turned to weeks as the starship Yuuei continued its aimless journey through uncharted space. The last several weeks came and went with relative ease. Ship repairs were still underway, but with exceptional progress, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 and Midoriya opted to steer clear of each other whenever possible, splitting the day and night shifts, and the Yuuei's newest resident became a fan favorite among the crew's Parasus Squares tournaments. The crew had spent the last 2 months scanning their never-ending junkyard in search of the entity, but with nothing to show for it. They had no way of knowing if they were even heading in the right direction. Despite their attempts to settle into a routine and keep their collective mind off of the families, homes, and obligations left behind in another corner of the universe, morale was low. They hadn't run into any notable threats, a pockmarked hull here, a plasma leak there, but nothing truly formidable. The crew took some solace in that security. The captain was slumped in his chair, staring blankly at the polluted void on the view screen in front of him. A loud, rumbling growl sounded from his stomach. It was the small things that had been getting to him, the faulty replicator gobbling up his toast every morning despite 𝐬𝐬's hardest diagnostics, his endless talent for misplacing his coffee, and the housekeeping ensigns constantly shifting his quarters around. A mug entered Midoriya's vision and he looked up to see a handsome face, his Vulcan science officer, Todoroki. "What's this?" the captain asked, taking the mug. "I have been told that your replicator is malfunctioning again. I brought you tea." Midoriya blinked in surprise before taking a sip from the mug. "Vulcan spice tea. That was very thoughtful of you," he mumbled into the cup, his face felt hot. "Humans do not function as efficiently on an empty stomach. Since you have been reluctant to eat as of late, I thought this would suffice. This region of space seems to be uninhabited, but we must stay vigilant. Alright, besides, you've seemed distressed." Midoriya looked up to the stoic face, dying to know what laid behind it. He was at a loss for words. Down in the mess hall, Tetsu, Shinso, and Kaminari contemplated life over a basket of fries. I don't know what to do at this point, Kaminari grumbled, idly brushing ketchup on his wax paper lining. The arguments are getting worse. Before I walk out of the door, every morning with him turns into a nightmare. You have to give him some space. Zero begged you not to take this commission. It's understandable that he is upset, especially, well now. Shinso sighed and nursed a mug of raktajino. There's nothing I can do. We're trapped here for better or worse, definitely worse, Tetsu cut in. Kaminari and buried his face in his hands. I've been taking extra shifts just to avoid being in my quarters. It's too much. Byakugan strode past them with a resentful scowl. Extras, he growled as he made his way to the holodeck. Computer, load program Katsuki G5 holodeck is already in use, Byakugan huffed. This was his time on the holodeck. The crew knew it, the civilians knew it, and Little Beach Deku knew it. Every single day at 1,300 hours, the ship stepped aside for the commander to blow off steam. Who the hell is in my holodeck? Computer. Open the doors. The doors drifted open, and the loud crash of dumbbells hitting the floor hit him. Get out of my holodeck, pet rock. Byakugan barked at an animated Kirishima, who shot up from a weight bench with an energized grin on his face. Looking good. Ready to get jacked, Commander. Kirishima beamed with wide eyes and flexed with muscles with laborious breathing, or at least a simulation of muscles and breathing. Byakugan was not amused. Get out, he growled, turning to the control panel and searching for the program override. The alien's smile faded and he trotted over to Byakugan. Hiking clothes and supplies materialized over the commander's uniform and Kirishima's perked back up. What are you doing? He peeked over Byakugan's shoulder. Can I join too? Byakugan adjusted the backpack on his shoulder and headed toward the center of the room. No, he said flatly, computer run program, Katsuki G5, the holodeck shimmered as a boundless mountain range materialized around them. A thick layer of pure white snow coated the landscape as delicate snowflakes drifted past Kirishima's line of sight, inches from his nose. His jaw dropped as a dense pinewood forest overran the landscape. He could smell the crisp fresh air and feel the frosty breeze on his face. Byakugan inhaled deeply through his nose and sighed, his breath visible against the frigid mountain air. Wow, Kirishima held out a hand as snowflakes gathered on the cool, rocky surface of his palm. Byakugan's shoes crunched against the snow with each step as he made his way up the path. The red alien matched his steps, placing his feet into the commander's footprints as they journeyed. When they arrived at the base of the mountain, Byakugan whipped around and flashed Kirishima another glare. F off, rocks for brains, he hissed before starting up the steep mountain path. Fuck off, Kirishima pondered. He had never heard that expression before. For him, Byakugan was strong to read. Crimson Riot was a man, he didn't take mess from anyone. Byakugan was definitely a man, Kirishima marveled, his aggressive tone was just part of his macho intensity. You're a tough guy, huh? Kirishima probed. A fiery blast the size of a personal shuttlecraft radiated heat from across the room. What the hell did you say, Kirishima? His head, you're a tough guy. I like tough guys, I'm a tough guy too, like Crimson Riot. Byakugan sneered, you. Don't pick a fight with me, I will blast you to rubble before the holodeck safeties can catch it. Oh, I bet you could. Byakugan's face scrunched. What the hell is up with this guy? Kirishima continued to tail Byakugan, observing his color changes as the cold bit at his pale skin. Humans always seem to be changing colors, how fun. He mused. They got about halfway up the mountain before Byakugan's combadge chirped. The commander cursed under his breath. Bridge to Commander Byakugan. Oh my god, what do you want? Sir, we're getting some strange readings, possibly another anomaly. This piqued his interest. Is it the one that stranded us here? We're not sure, sir, your presence is requested on the bridge. Fine, I'll be right there. 𝗵𝘃𝐻 out. He inhaled deeply before saying, "Computer, end program." 𝗵𝘃𝐻 exited the turbo lift with Kirishima in tow to find chaos on the bridge. Alarms blared as Midoriya's nails dug into the captain's chair armrest. "Is it the entity?" the commander asked, taking a seat in his chair. "No, it's a spatial anomaly," Ishido reported. "We're still trying to decipher the readings from our scans." Tokoyami swiveled around from his chair. "We're being pulled into a gravity well, Captain." "Full reverse," Midoriya commanded. The starship jarred and suddenly halted in position, knocking Kirishima to the ground. The team gradually collected themselves from the ground and inspected their surroundings. Todoroki straightened his uniform and reviewed the sensor feed. "Captain, we are locked in a collinear heading at warp 9. 1. Midoriya suppressed an urge to squint his eyes. "Then take us out of warp, Commander." "That is our predicament, Captain. We are not at warp. Whatever we are doing, we are not doing it of our own volition." "I have visual," Shoji exclaimed, displaying the image on the view screen. The crew stood from their seats, puzzling at the sight before them. "Fascinating. What are we seeing, Todoroki?" "Nothing ever catalogued by any Federation record, clearly artificial in origin. It seems that several cosmic strings, essentially singularities extended into a one-dimensional state, have been intermingled to create an enclosed passage, propelling us through a corridor of event horizons." 𝗵𝘃𝐻 turned to the commander. "What are our options?" "None as of yet. This phenomenon is purely gravitational in origin, so no weapon or shield configuration would solve our dilemma. There are no visible gaps in the corridor walls, so a warp field would be equally as ineffective at prying the bars open, if you will forgive the analogy." "That shouldn't be possible," Midoriya chewed on the inside of his lip as he looked at the anomaly, and the hull of the starship groaned under the stress. "Captain, we're being hailed." Koda frowned at his view screen. "It appears to be coming from inside the anomaly. Patch them through. Welcome to the Lerullian passage. To inhibit Hawking radiation-related corrosion, please adjust your shield frequency to match the specifications being displayed on your view screen. The Lerullian hegemony takes no responsibility for hull damage suffered during your travel. Thank you and enjoy your journey. Todoroki, the data is being transmitted to us. Adjusting shield frequency, now." Midoriya relaxed back into his chair and let out a relieved sigh as the hull stress dissipated. "Well, we've gotten ourselves caught in a finger trap, but the ship is safe and we seem to be in the company of a non-hostile party. Immediate crisis averted, huh?" The captain shot a friendly glance at his second-in-command. 𝗵𝘃𝐻 rolled his eyes and stomped off the bridge. Yaoyorozu checked the time and groaned. Her shift had ended 3 hours ago, but there was still work to be done and she was not the type to put it off for the morning. She grabbed a PADD from the engineering console and scrolled through the ever-growing list of repairs on the docket. The captain's replicator popped up on the list for the 3rd time this week. She rubbed her eyes in exhausted frustration. 3 diagnostics, 2 Heisenberg compensator swaps, and an entirely new unit, still no luck. It's not the replicator, it's the captain. A hand fell onto her shoulder. "Your shift is over, Momo," Kaminari smiled as he pulled the PADD out of her hands. "Go relax." "How can I relax when the captain can't find his precious toast?" Yaoyorozu said sarcastically, grabbing the PADD back from Kaminari and returning to her station. He patted her on the shoulder and she let out a soft sigh and rubbed her eyes. "Take it from someone who's been banished to the couch for 2 weeks, you gotta get laid, Momo." "Denki." Yaoyorozu cracked, elbowing her friend in the ribs. "You should talk to that ensign in security, 𝗵𝘃𝐻𝐸. He's half Klingon." Kaminari wiggled his eyebrows. "Kamina, his lower half." "Oh my god, Denki." Yaoyorozu's face flushed as Kaminari burst into roaring laughter. Their ears perked up at the sound of a clearing throat. Ensign 𝐬𝐻 stood awkwardly with a PADD in his hands and a light pink on his cheeks. He looked at the ground as he held out a PADD to Yaoyorozu. I need approval before I start repairs," 𝐬𝐻 stammered. Engineering wasn't his primary assignment, but the demand for expedited repairs called for extra hands on site. 𝐬𝐬 grabbed the PADD, accidentally brushing his hand on the way, and hastily processed the approvals. He blushed and mumbled a brief thank you before hurrying off. Maybe 𝐬𝐻 knows his way around a batleth human in the streets, Klingon in the 𝐲𝐿 𝐬𝐻 received a smack to the head from 𝐬𝐻. Midoriya made his way down the corridor, dragging his feet along the way. It was the 4th day since 𝗵𝘃𝗀, as payback for wasted time, and a fake emergency, coerced the captain into taking on several of his shifts and locked himself in the holodeck. Computer, time. The time is 0900 hours. Active run. The captain has been active since 0500 hours on stardate 54402. 37, Midoriya rocked his head back, tightly shut his eyes and let out a sigh of frustration and exhaustion. It's been 3 days. He stumbled through the door and floundered onto the bed. This is too much, Midoriya broadcasted to no one. Reciting his logs had gotten him into the habit of thinking aloud. He sluggishly rolled himself out of bed and lumbered into the sonic shower. He leaned his head against the wall and let his mind drift off as the warm, pulsating waves of excited air particles loosened the knots in his neck. Failure after failure played on loop in his head. A simple package delivery. He thought about his mom. She begged him to stay out of Starfleet. He thought of All Might and how he showed that same love, not with discouragement and tears over his handicap, but with admiration and the passing of an enormous responsibility. Above all, he lamented over the impossible and entirely unknown distance separating them. Midoriya dried himself and pulled on a pair of loose-fitting boxers before slipping under his covers. He wrapped himself tightly in the soft sheets and let his heavy eyelids fall. He melted into the mattress with an even weight pushing his body deeper and deeper, like a shuttlecraft calmly setting down on his bed with him sandwiched underneath. It was either exhaustion or depression, probably both. The young captain was in a deep sleep by the time his head settled on the pillow. Most of the night was silent, no midnight snacks, no ebb and flow of consciousness, not even a fleeting amorphous thought. However, there was one dream. He was with Uraraka. Her hair was like it used to be in high school, medium shoulder length with cute fringes framing her round face and complementing her wide, brown eyes. They were in their old apartment before their assignments. He was laying behind her in bed, her body compensating for the firmness of their Starfleet tissue mattress. His arms were wrapped around her as they cuddled, Uraraka's back pressed against his chest, his face pressed against her soft brown hair. It was comforting and warm. Midoriya missed having someone to come home to. A 𝐴𝐬 chirped and she stirred in his arms. Izuku, Uraraka breathed, running her fingers lightly over Midoriya's arms, and he smiled against her skin. Aren't you going to get that? He groaned and pulled Uraraka closer to his body. 5 more minutes, he mumbled. She giggled as he traced her curves with one of his hands. Her hips were much broader than he remembered. She craned her head back so they were cheek to cheek as Midoriya's hand drifted up her shirt. She reached her arm backward, sliding her hand up the back of his thigh and cupping him. His lips pressed against Uraraka's jaw right below her ear, and she gasped in a completely foreign voice. Izuku, wow. The foreign voice giggled with lucid clarity, it's about time. Midoriya's eyes shot open, swearing the voice wasn't a figment of his imagination. His sheets were pulled off of him again, laying in a curvy mound in front of him. There was something under the sheet and his hand was firmly cupped around a warm, soft handful of it. Midoriya's body went stiff and his eyes slowly looked down at the space in front of him. He was cradling a human-shaped indent in the mattress. It was midnight and he wasn't alone. There was a BRST in his hand. I was nearing my 2nd month on the Yuuei. The warm hum of the warp core during my midnight strolls through engineering, the hours I spend every afternoon melting into the soft LTHR of the captain's seat, and the endless database of foreign dishes and snacks I replicate in the empty mess hall. Maybe I wasn't the most useful member of the crew, and maybe I didn't have a commission or rank of my own, but I was part of the family. They just haven't taken the time to warm up to me yet. I didn't find myself on the ship through the most traditional means, the academy, endless applications and recommendation letters, or stuffy debriefs and mandatory assignments. I carved my own path. It all started when a boy picked me up at a bar. He was handsome, but clearly nervous, he couldn't even build up the courage to make eye contact with me once. He forgot to hold the cab door open for me on our way home and seemed to take much more interest in babysitting his belligerent friend than he did in me, but I wasn't the jealous type. We have a laissez-faire relationship. He runs the Starship, I bum off the crew's French fries, he lets me visit him on the bridge whenever I want to share his coffee, and every night, I return to our quarters and slip into bed quietly so as to not disturb him. I definitely wouldn't say it's love yet, he hasn't even made a move on me, but he's cute in a humble, neurotic way, and our casual arrangement works for both of us. He makes toast for me every morning and I eat it, all of it, even until my stomach hurts, to protect his waistline from the excess carbs, true symbiosis. Sometimes I misplace his things, and sometimes he tries to hog the sheets, unsuccessfully, I might add, no relationship is perfect. This morning, I hopped out of bed, had my morning toast, and was off to the mess hall. I strolled down the hall, feeling cute today, and nodded hello to my friends. They had their faces buried in their pads and passed right by. Busybodies, I chuckled. I passed by Ensign 𝐬𝐬 and flashed her my signature smile. She was too distracted to see me, another workaholic. Izuku really needs to order some shore leave to boost morale. Like clockwork, Commander Bakugo drudged down the hallway, too deep in an internal, growling rant to wave back. Oh 𝐀𝐦, always fuming about something. I stepped into the turbo lift with Lieutenant 𝐬𝐻. He's quiet, but we have an unspoken bond, almost spiritual, you know. No words or glances necessary. I walked with him to his quarters. He walked in and closed the door right in my face. He never leaves me hanging like this, it must just be a quick bathroom break. I waited outside of his quarters for a few minutes. The door slid open and he came out in a huff, with 𝐍𝐸 pleading from inside the living room. What about my needs? 𝐍𝐸 fussed, I can't do this. I didn't ask for this. And you shouldn't even what? 𝐬𝐻 snipped, I shouldn't even be in this position. Don't you think I know that? I'm doing everything I can. I'm just not. I was taken aback. It was uncomfortable that they were having such an NTMT argument with me directly in the hallway, but I felt for both of them. Relationships are strong, that's why Izuku and I keep our romance casual. 𝐍𝐸 pleaded, I didn't mean. I know what you meant. 𝐬𝐻 sighed, I'm leaving, my shift starts at 0700. I guess I'll see you when I come home. My life on the ship is often laid back, but it does get monotonous from time to time. Sometimes, having nothing to do stops my day before it begins. It takes everything I have to get out of bed sometimes. Not today though, after seeing what 𝐍𝐸 and 𝐬𝐻 were going through, I knew exactly what I was going to do with my day. It took hours of brainstorming and trial sketches. I had to use Izuku's formal shirts and as backup writing surfaces. He'll understand. I slaved over the replicator making prototypes. I went through so many, I had to start piling failed prototypes in Izuku's sonic shower after his room became too cluttered, but it all paid off. I followed 𝐬𝐻 to his quarters after his shift and he let me slip in the door behind him. 𝐍𝐸 was in the living room. 𝐬𝐻 took a deep breath. Hey! 𝐍𝐸 stumbled over his words, I'm sore, actually, you go first. 𝐬𝐻 stared at his feet timidly. I saw what you left me in engineering. A customized baking set. I forgot that you cared. I was confused. I never thought I had done anything to make 𝐬𝐻 doubt that I cared, but I'm glad he appreciated my effort. 𝐍𝐸 looked confused at 𝐬𝐻's words too, but he straightened his face and replied, I found your gift on the bed, molded sleeping guards for my elbows. You knew the sheets were clogging them up. That must have taken a lot of thought. I was touched, it took me all afternoon to get his measurements, he wouldn't stand still. Thank you, Denki, thank you, Hanta, that last part threw me for a curve. I don't know why they were thanking each other for my gifts, but no harm done. They would probably thank me later, probably with a cake, maybe a chocolate cake, My stomach rumbled. Job well done, Toru, I said aloud, time to turn in for the night. What the hell was that? 𝐍𝐸 said. Love, I thought to myself. It was love. Feeling fully satisfied with my expert gift giving, I decided to take my leave. I walked down the hallway with a skip in my step and hopped in the turbolift. Deck 2 please. A few seconds passed and the door whooshed open. Oh, hi Kirishima. Hey Toru. After returning to Izuku's quarters, I brushed my teeth with our couple's toothbrush and slipped into my man's arms, excited for the next day. Kaminari and Shiro didn't give credit where credit was due, but I slept like a baby. A good deed is its own reward. The naked truth, the ready room was frozen in dead silence. Midoriya sat off to the side, wallowing in his pajamas. Bakugo was the first to speak. You've been living in his room every night. Since the first day we boarded, that is correct. Toru replied, sitting across the table, draped in one of the captain's oversized t-shirts. You've been eating my fries, every day, right in front of my face, while naked, Tokoyami stated in monotone contemplation. And I thank you for your generosity. She mumbled through a full mouth with a freshly replicated basket of fries in her hands. My toothbrush, Midoriya shuddered. My dress uniforms, you look fine in anything, Izuku, she winked, although no one would have known it. My toast, all this time, it was you, he muttered, his voice barely audible. We have to determine how she evaded our censors. Todoroki stated. So let me get this straight, none of you have been able to see her this whole time. Kirishima giggled. Bakugo gripped the back of Kirishima's chair and wheeled him into the corner. We'll deal with you later, and your relationship with the captain, Tetsu probed as Midoriya buried his head in his hands. What gave you that impression? What can I say? He's a talker, I'm a listener. He muttered his life story when I met him at the bar, he muttered his thoughts on the way home, and he mutters his worries and anxieties every time he has me alone, classic boyfriend. Please throw me out an airlock, Midoriya muttered as his eyes watered in embarrassment. You weren't saying that when you groped me in bed, she chuckled. Bakugo began to exit the room. I don't have time for this. Todoroki, figure it out. He snapped his fingers at Midoriya and motioned towards the door. Chop chop, ghost 𝐓𝐻𝐿. Midoriya slowly shuffled out of the room behind Bakugo with his shoulders slumped. Todoroki walked over and stood at attention in front of Toru. Miss Hagakure, even as a stowaway, you are a Federation citizen under our care. You have been trapped in an unknown section of the universe with the rest of our crew, and as Starfleet officers, it is our duty to feed you. Toru suddenly felt hungry. To clothe you, Toru suddenly felt itchy. And to ensure your safe return to Earth. Toru could go either way. Todoroki stopped and gave a long pause. Tetsu, please replicate a set of proper civilian attire, make your best guess concerning the measurements. He turned back to the floating shirt in front of him. Miss Hagakure, welcome to the Yuuei. 2 months had passed since the Yuuei was dragged into the Laurelian Passage, the cluster of artificial cosmic strings propelling them forward into the unknown. Periodically, openings would form as ships entered and exited the passage. Midoriya spent weeks attempting to cut through the Hawking radiation and subspace distortion to hail others in the convoy but had no luck. Day 62, Bakugo groaned into the calm, no updates of note. No escape, no established contact with the convoy or Laurelian government. We're as as ever. The door hissed open and out came Yaoyorozu, PADD in hand. Commander, I've been analyzing scans of the convoy vessels and discovered their method of entry and exit. You're not going to like it. Bakugo snapped, my butt is getting blisters from sitting in this DMN chair, out with it. Trillium D. They use it to coat their hulls. I pulled up an old United Earth record. We used it to shield our vessels against gravimetric anomalies during the Shinbi conflict. It can't be replicated. A light steam and the sweet, searing scent of nitroglycerin fumed from his forehead. You're joking. We've been sitting here with our thumbs up for 2 months and the solution has been impossible all along. Ships have been zooming by right in front of our view screen coded in that CRP and we can't even hail them to ask for a cup of sugar. There is one other option. But please. I heavily recommend not using it. Speak. That's an order. The weapon, the one meant for the tentacle entity. We can make use of the quantum singularity B using it to tear a hole in the corridor walls and slip out. It will destabilize the passage and leave us defenseless if we find the entity, or if it finds us. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 shot up from his chair. That's it, we're busting out of this DMN thing. But we've been traveling for 2 months, we're not going to run into the entity, and let me repeat, we've been traveling for 2 months, we could have had more than a 𝗀𝗃𝗧𝗥 torpedo by now. We're getting the F out of here. He hissed, knuckles white as he clenched the armrest of his chair. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 to engineering. Ensign 𝐸𝐬's here. What's the status of our 𝗀𝗃𝗧𝗥 torpedo? It should be fully operational, sir. Arm the weapon. Commander, are you sure this is the best course of action? Regulation mandates that you inform the captain, Todoroki challenged, glancing up from his station. I have the bridge, right here, right now, I am your captain. Are you questioning my authority? I'm questioning your objectivity. We have discovered a method of escape without using conflict, we just have to find a way to obtain it. We have been trying to restore the calm for 2 goddamn months. It's not happening. Yaoyorozu, return to your station and make sure that weapon is locked and loaded. I am pushing that button in 10 minutes, and if we shoot blanks I am going to march into engineering and breach the DMN warp core. The weapon shot from the starboard launch tube. The computer sounded off, contact in 321, a massive implosion sent ripples down the corridor, warping the cosmic strings until a gap appeared. Forward. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 snapped. We're losing helm control, the walls are pulling us in. Full shields. Stabilize us and surf the gravimetric distortion until we glide through that gap. The Yuuei rode the riptide, falling into a gradual spin. We're coming in sideways. Brace for impact. Hull plating sheared off from gravimetric force as the Yuuei rolled out of the corridor wall. We're out. A triumphant smirk appeared on 𝗵𝘃𝗀's face. Now was that so strong? What's our position? Todoroki gathered himself from the floor and returned to his station. Commander, we are over 170 light-years from our original location, about 2 parsecs. From a binary system. Midoriya burst out of the turbolift red in the face and winded, what the hell happened? I was informing the commander, we are 170 li, I got us the hell out of that tunnel is what happened, Deku. Lieutenant Shoji spun around from his seat. Captain, there are 2 mid-sized cruisers approaching at warp 9. 8, they're scanning us, weapons hot. Raise shields. Midoriya commanded, as he briskly walked across the bridge to stand in front of the captain's chair. We're being hailed, Koda called out. The captain took a deep breath. On screen. A humanoid with semi-translucent skin appeared on the view screen. It had 3 pairs of bright golden-hued eyes from its forehead to a huge, gaping mouth cluttered with jagged, crooked teeth. It was adorned with crystals and sparkling metals from head to toe, possibly decorative, possibly a part of their anatomy. A string of alien characters was burned into its bare chest, a terrorizing sight for all. This is Leader Donin of the vessel, Comer. Identify yourself, the Larulian snarled, its voice low and gravely. I am Captain Izuku Mido. Captain Izuku, you and your crew are under arrest for damage to the Larulian passage and evasion of toll payments. Come willingly or you will be fired upon. Midoriya put his hands up defensively, a strained smile on his face. Whoa, there's been a huge misunderstanding. We've been trapped in Yo. A bright scan penetrated their hull, sweeping the room from right to left. Midoriya shivered as a soft tingle passed through him. We have completed a bioscan of your vessel. You are harboring an undocumented 𝗁𝐸𝐸 and weaponized genetic augmentations have been detected in your entire crew complement. You are in violation of dozens of Larulian statutes. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. 𝗁𝐸𝐸. He must be referring to Kirishima. Midoriya's forced smile faded. Siri can't allow you to take a member of my crew. Has he committed a crime? A 𝗁𝐸𝐸 is not a he, Captain, it is a form of capital. Its free movement across our boundaries and your foreign possession of it are crimes in themselves. This is your final warning. The Lourulian ship is charging their weapons, Captain. Helmsman Ishido announced. There are stories about every hero their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own. All Might's words rang true. I won't let them have him. Midoriya shut off the view screen and faced his bridge crew. If they want to fight, then they've got one, Midoriya growled through clenched teeth. Tetsu, target their weapons systems and fire at will. Ashida, determine the limits of their border and find us a route out of here. Aye, Captain. The ship locked rotation with the domer, skimming along the hull from less than 500 meters before firing 3 extended bursts from their phaser banks. No effect, Captain. A foreign energy bolt slammed the Yuuei's hull and tore through decks 8 and 9 like tissue paper. Secure the bulkheads. Midoriya slammed the comm button. Shishida, oversee the evacuation of all living quarters. Use caution. Today is a good day to die, Captain, the young Klingon proclaimed over the comm in roaring laughter. Turn to port and fire quantum torpedoes. The missiles blasted through the launch tubes, exploding on impact with the enemy shields. No critical systems hits. Tetsu shouted over the tumultuous sound of bursting fuses and slamming debris. Damn it, we have to be creative. Todoroki, what can we throw into this fire? Shockwave hit the bridge and launched the captain across the room. His head smacked the aft console and shattered the control screen, sending the ship into an uncontrolled tumble. Override aft console and stabilize flight path, code Shoto A2. The ship steadied as Midoriya returned to his chair. As the ship jolted from the continuing flurry of superior weapons fire, Todoroki stumbled his way to the captain. We are in a losing battle. None of our weapons can penetrate their shields. A transphasic torpedo would have. Helmsman Ishido scolded. Your first officer blew it up and got us into this mess. So it wasn't a misunderstanding. We provoked them. Midoriya slammed his armrest. God damn it. Captain, we have to accept the facts. The Yuuei will be destroyed. You have to order the crew to abandon ship. A simple package DLVRY. Midoriya grabbed the back of his chair and stood himself up. Time slowed to a crawl. He watched the bridge crew steadfast in their duties, even in the face of death. He gazed through the view screen as their most powerful weapons sent soft ripples through the domer's shields like grains of sand hitting the ocean. If you feel yourself hitting up against your limit, remember for what cause you clench your fists, remember why you started down this path, and let that memory carry you beyond your limit. All Might. Electrified pops and crackles crept up Midoriya's spine, radiating down his arms until they reached the tips of his fingers. He shut his eyes as a brilliant light intensified, growing brighter and brighter until it was blinding. He opened his eyes as crisp bolts struck the ground and charred the LTHR of his captain's chair. He knew what he had to do. Kaken, I'm going to regret this, but we're already in battle. You have the bridge. Todoroki, you're with me. We're taking a walk to the airlock. First contact. Midoriya fastened his EV support gear as Todoroki patched in through the intercom on the other side of the hatch. Captain, the probability of your plan succeeding is negligible and our time is running out, Todoroki petitioned. We're trapped in enemy space without the force or even the reputation of the Federation behind us. The Yuuei is our only means of travel. Our entire arsenal of energy weapons are useless against the enemy's shields, so we die on this ship or we die in escape pods. The Lourulian said it himself, whether we like it or not, we're weaponized genetic augments, we either face execution for it or we use it to our advantage. Todoroki withheld his rebuttal. Assume firing position, Captain. Venting airlock in 321, Midoriya exited the side of the Yuuei with a small hiss, an infinitesimally tiny speck drifting between 3 colossal vessels that paid him no mind, separated from the endless vacuum of space by 1.5 inches of EV suit. He slammed against the domer with a loud bang, an inaudible clink against the large mass. Violent cracks of green lightning burst as he leaped across the ship, leaving massive cavities in his wake. A mid-ranking Lourulian broke from their station. Leader Donin, we've detected a small object on our stern hull plating. A weapon may have bypassed our shields. Determine the nature of the weapon and handle it accordingly. Midoriya traveled along the surface in explosive leaps. His comm chirped. "Captain, you are causing moderate hull damage, but your attacks are not affecting any critical systems." "I haven't attacked yet, Commander." Midoriya answered in between leaps, "Just getting myself where I need to go." Two cannons trained themselves on Midoriya as he made his way across the hull. "We have locked on the foreign object, leader. It's zone of their crew members." Donan transferred the weapons lock to the main view screen. He stared in awe as the small speck, wrapped in lightning that gleamed like emerald, burst craters the size of a large scout ship on the Domer's surface. "He's in direct contact with the vessel, leader. Do we attack?" "Lower cannon intensity to 10% and fire on the target. Defender, charge ablative hull plating." Midoriya sped through the valleys of the flowing ship, a glowing streak to the sensors. He whipped around and slammed the dense soles of his EV support gear to the ground, propelling himself through the weapon's fire and scathed and landing him on the vertical surface of the forward sensor array. "Get him off of there, he's going to Saturn Station smash." The navigational sensor vaporized in a fireball as a concussive wave knocked the Domer crew to the ground. Navigational sensors are offline. Smash. Targeting Senso smash. Shield generators. Smash leader. We're dead in the water. The Yuuei bridge crew marveled at the view screen, not a closed jaw in the room aside from Bikugu. Todoroki exited the turbolift and walked briskly to his console. "Computer, initiate program transport, Shoto M17. The room gasped as a smoking, electrified Midoriya materialized on the bridge and broke into a coughing fit as the smell of charred EV suit invaded their lungs. Todoroki passed over the captain's suit with his right hand and extinguished the flames. "You pushed the suit too strong, Captain. I advise you to use more restraint in future excursions outside of the vessel." Midoriya got to his feet and removed his pressurized helmet with a sharp pop and slow hiss. "Mr. Koda, please put the second Lourillian cruiser on screen." The second Lourillian ship commander blinked onto the screen. "Enemy vessel, you will drop your shields and prepare to be boarded," he commanded, with much less conviction than the first captain. Midoriya approached the screen, still catching his breath but with full command. "You don't have enough ships to take us on. Now please, make the right choice and allow us to leave your space peacefully, with our 𝗠𝐿𝐸 passenger." The screen flickered and went black. Ishido looked up from her station. "They are maintaining position, but have powered down their weapons." "Sounds like a polite invitation out of the door to me." "Tokoyami, take us out." Warp 6-inch. The warp core hummed to life for a brief moment, followed by every light in engineering abruptly cutting off. Midoriya tapped his comm badge when the bridge suddenly went dark. He slumped into the captain's chair, rubbing his temples and shaking his head. "It's one thing after another, Yaoyorozu, what happened?" "I'm not sure, Captain." Her voice was laced with fatigue. "There's been a cascade of system failures, we can barely keep up down here. We need to leave Lourillian space as soon as possible. They're standing in front of us tapping their feet as we speak." ♯ entered the bridge. "Aren't you supposed to be in sickbay?" Midoriya sighed. Tension was thick in the air as the bridge crew nervously waited for power to come back online. "I don't understand why you won't get this through your head. You are going to lose your arm. You froze it to the bone. If we were home, I could synthesize biosynthetic replacement. But guess what, we're not home. Stop using it," ♯ berated. "Sai, you have a few microfractures and dermal abrasions but you're cleared." Bikuga looked at the pair, then exited the bridge once the captain was cleared for duty. Two more Lourillian ships converged at their location. "Captain, we have to display some sign of withdrawal." "Your bluff will only get us so far," Todoroki cautioned. "It wasn't a bluff. Well, mostly." "Captain, warp is still out, but we have impulse," Yaoyorozu called over the intercom. Midoriya let out a shaky breath. "All right, if we have to limp away, we limp. Tokoyami, take us out." "Aye, Captain." They hobbled out of Lourillian space at a snail pace and with an erratic track due to power fluctuations to the navigational sensors. 3 Lerullian patrol ships vigilantly trailed the Yuuei at a distance until they crossed the border. The Khan chirped, "Be warned, Captain, if you are ever discovered in Lerullian space again, you will be fired upon on sight. You have made an enemy today."